Handa ka na bang magpabakuna? Narito ang mga paalala at hakbang na gagawin sa proseso ng pagbabakuna. Bago ang pagbabakuna, kinakailangan mo nang dumaan sa pre-vaccination screening. Kinakailangan kumuha muna ng medical clearance sa doktor ang mga kabilang sa special population tulad ng mga sumusunod. May autoimmune disease, may cancer, may HIV, sumasailalim sa transplant operation, kasalukuyang umiinom ng steroids, mga pasyenteng may taning na ang buhay dahil sa karamdaman o nakaratay na lang sa kama o bahay. Kapag ikaw ay nabigyan na ng medical clearance mula sa iyong doktor, narito ang mga dapat gawin bago ang araw ng iyong pagbabakuna. 1. Humingi ng schedule at lugar kung saan ka magpapabakuna sa iyong pinakamalapit na barangay health center. 2. Huwag kalimutan dali ng iyong government ID, proof of comorbidity o medical clearance, pati na ang face mask, face shield at hand sanitizer. Sa araw ng pagbabakuna, narito ang mga steps na dapat sundin. Step 1. Waiting area. Siguraduhin kayo ay pumunta sa tamang oras at petsa ng inyong schedule sa pagbabakuna. Hindi papayagan ang mga walk-in sa vaccination sites. Maupo sa bakanting upuan alinsunod sa tamang pagkakasunod na bilang. Hintayin na tawagin kayo para sa susunod na hakbang. Habang nag-aantay, sumunod sa minimum public health standards. Isuot ang face mask at face shield, sundin ang proper physical distancing at ugaliing maghugas at isanitize ang kamay. Step 2. Registration. Sundin ang mga patakaran ng inyong LGU o vaccination site sa pag-register at ipakita ang inyong government ID. Bibigyan kayo ng kopya ng informed consent form, health screening form at mga pamphlet tungkol sa bakuna na pwede ninyong basahin. Hintayin na matapos ang proseso ng registration bago pumunta sa susunod na hakbang. Step 3. Screening. Kayo ay isasailalim sa health screening at tatanungin tungkol sa inyong kalusugan tulad ng history of COVID-19 exposure, history of vaccination, mga gamot na iniinom, kung may allergies at iba pa. Ito ay para makasiguro kung angkop para sa inyo ang magpabakuna sa kasalukuyan. Step 4. Health education. Makinig sa ibabahaging importanteng impormasyon tungkol sa pagbabakuna para sa COVID-19. Kung mayroon pa kayong ibang katanungan, sumangguni sa ating mga vaccination staff. Siguraduhin na pirmahan ang consent form na pumapayag kayong magpabakuna bago pumunta sa susunod na hakbang. Step 5. Vaccine administration. Ito ang panahon kung saan kayo ay babakunahan sa loob ng 1 o 2 minuto. Huwag kalimutan na kunin ang inyong vaccination card pagkatapos matanggap ang bakuna. Step 6. Observation. Alinsunod sa Department of Health, ang lahat na magpapabakuna ay kailangan manatili sa pasilidad ng 15 hanggang 30 minuto para obserbahan kung may hindi magandang nararamdaman. Ang ating medical staff ay nakatutok sa inyo para ma-monitor ang inyong kalusugan. Bibigyan kayo ng mga pangalan ng health facility o hotline kung saan pwedeng pumunta kung kinakailangan sumangguni dahil sa side effects ng bakuna. Pagkatapos ng pagbabakuna, huwag kalimutang gawin ang mga sumusunod. 1. Itanong ang mga nais mong malaman tungkol sa vaccine na binigay sa'yo. 2. Huwag kalimutan ang iyong vaccination card. 3. Alamin ang petsa ng second dose ng iyong pagbabakuna. 4. Kunin ang contact number o alamin kung sino ang dapat tawagan kung sakali mang ikaw ay nakadarama ng seryosong side effects. Narito rin ang ibang mga paalala na dapat tandaan. Siguraduhin bumalik sa schedule para sa pangalawang dose ng bakuna. Laging tatandaan na kahit nabakunahan ka na, ay huwag pa rin kalimutan sumunod sa minimum public health standards tulad ng pagsasanitize ng mga kamay, pagsusuot ng face mask at face shield, at pagdistansya sa iba ng 1 metro. Magmask, hugas, iwas, airflow. Ito ay para na rin sa ating proteksyon at sa proteksyon ng iba. Narito ang pagkakasunod-sunod ng mga eligible population na target mabakunahan. Para sa karagdagang impormasyon, bisitahin ang mga sumusunod na pages. Facebook, Official DOH.gov. Twitter, @DOH.gov.ph. Website, doh.gov.ph. Tara na sa Bida Vaccination!
Okay, magandang umaga na imbag abigat, marhay na aga, maayong buntag, good morning mga ka-DepEd and of course our partners in the basic education sector. Oras na para tanungin ang katanungang ito. What time is it? Sabay-sabay tayo virtually. It's Research O'Clock. Tama ba, Teds?
Yes, Emil, magandang umaga, good morning at maayong buntag. Gaya nga nasabi ni Emil, Research O'Clock na. Welcome to our Research O'Clock live on DepEd Philippines Facebook page. Live din po tayo sa ating DepEd YouTube channel right now. Ayan, before we formally start, nais po namin i-introduce ang aming mga sarili.
Ako po si Emil.
At ako naman po si Teds. Kami po ay nagmula sa Policy, Research and Development Division ng Planning Service. At kami po ang magiging moderator nyo ngayong araw para sa ating research forum. Kasama din po natin ang ating mga Filipino Sign Language interpreters na sina Sir Billy, Miss Faye, at syempre si Miss Ayen from the Philippine School for the Deaf, as well as our partners from Public Affairs Service Publication Division na tinutulungan tayo sa pag-broadcast ng forum ngayong araw. Stay tuned mga ka-DepEd from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. para sa isang makabuluhang talakayan natin.
Ayan.
Yan, Sir Emil?
Yan, Ted, salamat for introducing our partners, Pero bago tayo magsimula, ano nga ba yung Research O'Clock? Ayan, so Research O'Clock is a research dissemination forum that aims to promote the use of research results and evidence in decision-making, program designing and implementation, plan formulation, and adjustment for the basic education. So gagamitin natin ang mga ebidensya para sa ating pagdedesisyon, Kung saan man tayo sa classroom, sa classroom, sa SDO, sa RO, at lalo na sa central office, This forum has been convening educators, researchers, program implementers, and policymakers to discuss education issues and provide valuable inputs for future relevant actions. Iba-iba magkakasama tayo ngayong umaga, This is also a venue for policy feedback from field implementers. Kaya naman, we encourage everyone to share their insights sa ating comment section. Okay. Yung Research O'Clock, nagsimula ito noong 2018. And noong 2018, nagkaroon tayo ng 14 studies na na-present in 5 session. Noong 2019, 36 education topics yung na-present natin sa loob ng 6 sessions. Ayan, last year dahil sa pandemic, ginawa natin ito via DepEd Facebook page, virtual session, and we presented 12 topics. Ayan. So this year, because we are continuing still the implementation of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, from August to October, all topics will revolve around the evidence from our very own Basic Education Research Fund o BERF grantees, as well as different partner organizations in terms of their experience in implementing distance learning. Gusto po nating suportahan ang pag-implement ng BELCP for school year 2021-2022. And Ted, tama 2 weeks away from the opening of classes.
Yes, sir.
During the first episode, we talked about how to support our parents in distance education. Noong nakaraang linggo naman, napag-usapan natin yung mga teaching strategies during distance education. Ngayon, if hindi po namin kayo nakasama during the first 2 episodes, huwag po kayong mag-alala. Mapapanood nyo pa rin ulit ito. Just search Research O'Clock. Mapapanood siya sa DepEd FB, sa official FB page ng DepEd, and of course sa DepEd YouTube. So dalawa, multi-platform tayo ngayon. So any platform, pag i-search niyo po ang Research O'Clock, mapapanood niyo po ang previous episodes from the first 2 weeks and even episodes from last year. Ayan. Teds?
Again, kung na-miss niyo yung ating first 2 episodes, pwede niyo silang balikan. Ayan, sana all binabalikan sa ating DepEd FB page at DepEd YouTube channel. Ayan, for today's forum, our topic is about assessing learners in distance education. So through our presentations later, we will learn about the monitoring and assessment for learning in various learning distance modalities, particularly sa pag-assess ng mga strategies or mga initiatives na pwedeng mag-measure ng learning sa distance learning, at paano ba natin may involve yung ating mga parents or guardians sa pag-assess ng learning ng mga bata.
Ayan. So, ayan. Maraming salamat. So, assessment ang ating assessment, ang ating topic for this morning. Ayan. So, tingnan natin next sa ating next slide, makikita po natin. Kung napansin niyo po kanina bago tayo magsimula, we have a quick activity for everyone. Gusto po namin kayong i-engage ngayong session na ito. So we want to know, how do you describe your experience or strategies in assessment during distance learning in one word? In one word, paano nyo kaya ma-express kung ano ang inyong naranasan sa pag-assess, classroom assessment natin sa ating mga learners last year, no? Kung nakapunta na po kayo sa mga bagong pasok po, please proceed to www.menti.com with code 97862711. And of course, pwede nyo pong i-scan itong ating QR code para po madiretso tayo doon sa website. Excited po kaming malaman kung ang inyong mga thoughts about it. Maraming salamat po. We encourage everyone to please tell us what is your experience and engage with us this morning.
Okay, muling paalala, we are encouraging everyone to participate in our Mentimeter activity by sharing your classroom strategies during distance learning. Just go to www.menti.com at i-input lamang po yung code na 97862711. Or kung may extra device po kayo, ayan, gamitin po natin para i-scan yung QR code na nakikita natin sa screen para ma-direct po tayo sa ating link. And now, before we proceed to the presentation, alam ko excited na kayo para sa main highlight ng ating research forum. Yun yung mga research presentation. We are honored today to be welcomed by our director, Director Roger B. Masapol, para sa isang welcome message. Nandito ba Sir Emil si Director Roger ngayon?
I think medyo wala pa, hindi ata nakakonect si Sir Roger ngayon. Pero Teds, para ma-engage natin ang ating mga kasamahan, pakialam muna natin sino makakasama natin ngayong umaga.
Okay,
mga
ayan.
Speakers natin.
Sige. Ayan, for this virtual setup ng ating research o'clock, we invited select DepEd personnel who have been granted with birth and who have conducted research on today's topic tungkol sa assessing ng distance learning. Kasama rin natin yung mga organization na naging partner ni DepEd para ma-ensure yung quality and basic education sa area ng holistic and development learning, even before the pandemic. So nandito ngayon yung atin makikita sa screen yung ACRC and of course our select DepEd personnel from central office and field office. Ayan, kung mapapansin niyo po no, nasa virtual platform tayo ngayon, nais po rin namin na makapag-interact sa ating mga audience. So ipapakita ko lang po ang ilang mga protocol para sa ating open forum later. So ayan, when raising your questions or when you would like to share your insights, please be reminded po for the following protocol. Una, let us ask only relevant and direct questions to our presenters and guests. Pangalawa po, i-indicate po natin kung para kanino yung tanong sa simula ng ating comment. At isulat po natin yung ating comment dito sa baba ng ating live stream. May mga nakaantabay po tayong mga staff no, para tignan po yung mga questions natin. Ayan. At kung gusto niyo pong ma-recognize, pwede niyo pong indicate yung name niyo kapag nagtatanong tayo. Kung gusto niyo naman pong maging anonymous sa pagtatanong, you can post your question in our Padlet wall. So puntahan lang po natin yung link na bit.ly/VRO2021. So case sensitive po to, tignan po natin na or i-scan po natin. Scan po natin para may direct po tayo sa Padlet wall natin. Again po, yung link po natin ay padlet.com/PSPRDQAEP3. So yan po yung ating link. Ayan, para po makita natin sa ating Padlet wall, may mga nakalagay po dyan na specific kung gusto natin mag-share ng ating insights or yung questions po natin direct kung kaninong presenter po natin itatanong. I-click lang po natin yung plus sign para doon po tayo maglagay ng ating comments and questions.
Ayan. We hope na ma-engage namin kayo. Ngayong umaga, Tets, gusto natin kasama natin sila all the time, no? Para lang din alam natin na everyone is learning from our research o'clock this morning. And of course, we want to hear your insights. Sabi nga, this is time for us to feedback on our policies, on our programs, and on the research presented this morning. So please do engage, scan that QR code. Punta po tayo sa website, sa Facebook comment section natin. Andun po nakapin ang ating link for our questions and insights. Ayan. Ngayon umaga po, no, kanina pinisent natin yung mga one word na nagde-describe. So tingnan natin ngayon yung initial results nito. Kung ano ba ang word na nagde-describe, ano yung word na pinakamalaki sa ating word cloud, no? That describes learning assessment on distance education. Ayan. Pwede ba nating i-show yung ating Mentimeter results? Okay, ayan. Kitang-kita po natin sa ating Menti results, no, na ang pinakamalaking word natin for distance learning assessment ay challenging. Ayan, so let's see. Mamaya makikita natin ano ba yung challenges natin in terms of assessment pagdating sa distance education. Ayan, so meron ditong mga salitang difficult, a must to consider. May mga naglagay na din kung ano yung ginagawa nila. They put using text or call, may using Google Quiz, may approved using Microsoft Quiz. So iba't ibang modalities ang pag-assess nila. Adjustment, magandang salita po yun, yung nag-adjust tayo ang mga teachers natin on assessment during distance learning. Ayan, digital education, flexible and collaborative. May collaboration dito ako nakita. So talagang na-stretch ang ating mga teachers, no? And they were able to adjust. So ayan, yung mga connecting na salita, no, flexible, adjustment, of course difficult, kapareho siya ng challenging. How? Mayroong malaki na salita, how. So matututunan natin yan ngayon. Makikita po natin yan. Ano ba ang iba't ibang paraan? Ano ang iba't ibang suporta na ibibigay natin in terms of assessment, classroom assessment. So excited din po kaming malaman ano pa ang mga salita natin dito. Modules, honesty, tama? Sorry, medyo kailangan makita yung mga salita. But in a nutshell, ang pinakamalaki siguro, ang pinakamadaming nagsagot ay challenging. So exciting po ito because of course when we are challenged, no, mas lalo tayong nagaganahan to actually perform or to actually apply our learning. So I hope that after this Research O'Clock session, itong challenging natin, mat-translate natin. Yung pagiging challenge natin, ngayon mat-translate natin into doing innovative classroom assessment, learning assessment strategies, no? And of course, to work with other teachers and of course, our school heads, our SDO personnel, to provide, to ensure na na-assess natin ang learning even in distance learning. Ayan. So I think we're all excited na tayo sa ating mga speakers for this morning. But before that, sabi po namin, tuloy-tuloy ang pag-engage namin sa inyo. So, meron ulit tayong Padlet activity na gagawin natin habang nakikinig tayo. Okay, so kanina po sa ating Mentimeter, may mga naglagay na doon ng iba't ibang strategies nila. Like they use Google Meet or Google Quiz, Microsoft Quiz, so iba't ibang platforms. This time around, we want you to share your strategies in assessing learners. Hindi na to one word, no? Share with us your strategies kasi mamaya titingnan natin para din hindi lang tayo matuto from our speakers, but we also learn from each other and we learn from you, our audience, for this morning. Ayan, so ang question natin, what are your strategies in assessing learners during distance learning? So proceed po tayo sa padlet.com/psprd/assessment. Pwede po natin siyang screenshot or para mas madali, scan that QR code na nakikita po natin sa ating mga screen this morning. Okay, excited po kaming malaman kasi mamaya ipapakita natin after the presentations, ipapakita natin ano-ano yung iba't ibang strategies na ginawa or innovation na ginawa ng ating mga teacher in terms of distance learning. Ayan. So, excited ba tayo, Theds? Excited ako for this morning.
Sobrang excited, Emil, no? Ang daming magaganap ngayong araw at isang makabuluhang talakayan yung kikita ng ating mga audience ngayong araw.
Ayan. So, excited na tayo. Mag-start na tayo. Ayan, excited na tayo sa ating mga speakers. So Theds, take it away, ipakilala na natin sila.
I know you are all excited at ako excited na rin mapakinggan yung ating mga presenter, no? So wag na po nating patagalin. Let us now go to our research forum proper. So to present our first presenter, siya po ay si Mr. Carlos Chan Chow C. Corios o kilala bilang Sir Kaloy. Siya po ay isang Education Program Supervisor from the Division of Surigao del Sur, Caraga Region. Yung kanyang mga research interest po ay patungkol sa ICT integration in teaching, practical approaches in assessment, and professional development to teachers and school leaders. Siya po ay nakapag-publish na ng mga researches sa mga local at international journal publication at nakapagbahagi na rin ng mga research results sa iba't ibang national and international research forums. Today, he will be discussing the use of thematic approach in addressing assessment gaps in the new normal education. So, let us all welcome our first presenter, Sir Kaloy.
Learning autonomy is important in distance learning, including assessment of learning outcomes. One of the main barriers to learning and assessment in distance education is the absence of interaction between teachers and students in a learning environment. The individualized form of learning and the lack of interaction for assessment are challenges for both students who need instructional help and for teachers who want to assist students in cognitive development. May I present to you the use of thematic approach in addressing assessment gaps in the new normal education. The abrupt shift of education in distance learning programs lacks mechanisms for teachers to assess and provide feedback and formative guidance to students. According to Allen 2004, assessment is an important instructional component that collects information as regards to the knowledge, skills, and values that students have learned. In the assessment conducted by Surigao del Sur Division during the first quarter of school year 2020 to 2021, teachers are challenged to provide assessment in distance learning delivery. They claim that provision of a wide range of assessment tools to learners, the development of flexible assessment tools to learners, and the delivery of authentic performance assessment to measure learners' understanding were very challenging. This result of the assessment concluded the teachers find it very difficult to design, deliver, and evaluate assessment as well as assessment results in the new normal education. In short, nahihirapan ang aming mga guro sa pagbibigay ng angkop na pagtataya sa distance learning education. The challenges encountered by teachers prompted Surigao del Sur Division to develop an assessment mechanism aligned to the two policies released by the Department of Education. DepEd Order Number 31 Series of 2020 mandated that school shall design assessment that is integrative and collaborative, stressing that assessment should be holistic and authentic to capture the attainment of the most essential learning competencies. DepEd Memorandum Number 307 Series of 2020 also stated that assessment in schools must be interdisciplinary, and with that, schools must design performance tasks as an assessment of learning that integrate competencies and learning areas to foster academic ease. Upang matugunan ang mga panukalang nabanggit at upang matulungan ang aming mga guro sa aming paaralan, napagdesisyonan ng Curriculum Implementation Division na subukan ang paggamit ng thematic approach sa pagbuo ng mga material sa pagtataya dahil ito ang nakikita naming makapagbibigay ng mabisang paraan sa pagtataya sa distance education. So that we are guided with the necessary steps in resolving the issues, this study answered the following questions. Number 1, what are the challenges encountered by teachers of Surigao del Sur Division in the delivery of quality assessment? Number 2, what actions were done to address the challenges of teachers in the delivery of quality assessment? And number 3, what is a significant impact of using a thematic approach to teachers in the delivery of quality assessment? We started this research from the evaluation of the challenges encountered by our teachers in the delivery of quality assessment. The result of the evaluation responded by 3,168 teachers were carefully analyzed and used in the comprehensive planning to provide direct actions in addressing the challenges. Sa mga nakalap na hinaing mula sa aming mga guro, sinimula namin doon ang pagbuo ng plano upang matugunan ang kanilang mga pangangailangan. And from that, we designed necessary steps using the thematic approach to assessment. The thematic approach to assessment covered the whole year implementation, including revision, evaluation, and finalization. Upang makapagsimula kami, bumuo kami ng mga piling guro mula sa grades 1 to 12 na maging bahagi sa paggawa ng theme-based assessment. We provided capacity building using synchronous and asynchronous online and face-to-face modalities from November to December 2020. We started the process with 15 steps during the pilot development of the materials, and the developed materials were piloted in the whole division during the first quarter of the school year. Para magkaroon kami ng mga basihan para masiguro na mabisa ang nagawang material, a focus group discussions with select developers were conducted. The purpose of FGD is to evaluate the feasibility of the development process and steps. We also select teacher users in the document analysis to evaluate the usability of the theme-based assessment materials. The results of the FGD and documents analysis were the basis of revisions of the new process, which trimmed down from 15 steps to 12 steps. The revised process now were introduced to wider group of writers during series of capacity building to teachers and school leaders. Lahat ng 37 districts ay involved sa paggawa ng thematic assessment materials. The process and its steps were finalized and disseminated to the whole division in the third and fourth quarters, where we provided massive capacity building to teachers in the whole division. Para maabot namin ang lahat ng guro sa buong dibisyon, ginamit namin ang iba't ibang platforms and modalities tulad ng paggamit ng YouTube channels, LAC sessions, and in-service trainings in districts and schools. Ang mga gurong naging trained mula sa pilot development hanggang the finalized version ay naging trainers na din, facilitators, mentors, at coaches. And to see if there is an impact of the thematic design in the delivery of quality assessment, we conducted the year-end evaluation to our teachers. To give all of you a clearer picture of our thematic journey, I will be showing to you the results of all our efforts in coming up this innovation. From the results of the survey we conducted at the beginning of the school year, teachers declared that they experienced very challenging tasks in the delivery of quality assessment. Hindi nila alam paano gagawin ang pagbibigay ng dekalidad na pagtataya sa bawat mag-aaral. And topping the list, teachers experience very challenging tasks in the delivery of authentic performance assessment to measure learners' understanding. Paano nga ba susukatin? At ano ang pamamaraan ng pagsukat? Since there is absence of interaction between teachers and students in the distance learning, teachers claim that it is very difficult to design and deliver authentic performance tasks to learners. Teachers implied also that they experience extreme challenges in measuring the reliability and validity of assessment results that determine learners' progress. More than this, provision of wide range of assessment tools to learners and the development of flexible assessment tools is difficult for them in the distance learning delivery. Sabi nga ng isang guro, paano niya masusukat ang kakayahan ng kanyang mga estudyante ngayong hindi niya nakikita ang mga ito at hindi niya nakikita kung paano nito gagawin ang pagpapayaman ng kanyang natutuhan. Teachers have even claimed that if the challenges continued to persist, learning outcomes will not be measured as required by the competencies. With the challenging clamor of teachers in distance learning, our development of Pag-asa highlighted the use of thematic approach in the development of assessment materials because we see that this best support effective learning in the distance education. Sinubukan naming gawin ang isang mapanghamong disenyo sa gitna ng pandemya. This pag-asa provided a reference for teachers to engage in integrative thematic approach as a provision of assessment in the new normal. Pag-asa stands for Performance Assessment Guide for Authentic Students' Achievement. We believe that word pag-asa is somehow giving hope to lessen the burden of teachers and students by reducing the number of tasks required by schools without sacrificing the goals of learning. Pag-asa used a theme-based approach where authentic performance tasks provided a realistic assessment that minimizes the risk of wasting resources and maximizes learning outcomes. This is a way of assessing where learning areas are connected and integrated into a theme. Tinitingnan namin dito paano tutuhugin ng isang gawain, task o output ang iba't ibang competencies at subject areas. This concept allowed learners to connect their learning and understanding to real-life learning experiences. Sinisiguro namin na sa bawat paggawa ng bata ng isang output ay may isa sa buhay niya doon ang kanyang kaalaman at naiintindihan mula sa kanyang mga karanasan at sa kung ano pa ang magagawa niya sa buhay gamit ang aral na kanyang natutuhan mula sa kanyang mga module. To tell you more about our process steps, Pag-asa has 3 development phases. These phases were used by the development teams as they collaborate in the crafting of learners' performance assessment guide. Phase 1 focused on the different preliminary activities. The first step in thematic assessment is the review of the most essential learning competencies, content standards, and performance standards. This step allowed teachers to understand what learning outcomes are expected by the content and the performance standards and what skills are expected by the competencies. Tinitingnan dito ng bawat guro kung ano ang inaasahan ng bawat learning area, anong hinihingi ng content at performance standards, at anong kakayahan ang gustong maipakita ng bawat kasanayang pampagkatuto. Kapag nakuha na ng guro ang target ng bawat competency, susundan niya ito ng Step 2, which allowed teachers to decide which competency shall be used. This is where teachers need to look where the contents, performance standards, and competencies can be capsulized. Teachers now choose a competency in a quarter that will capsulize the rest of the competencies with the maximum consideration on the achievement of performance standards. In Step 3, our teachers think about what experiences can learners practically apply in their real life and how these learnings can make them functional in their society. Our authentic assessment ensures how our students use and apply their knowledge and skills in real-life settings. Our teachers deepen the learning goals and design select appropriate learning experiences to be used by learners in the assessment process. With so many learning experiences, Step 4 help our teachers decide what learning experiences are deemed appropriate for every competency. These learning experiences serve as learners' takeaways while they progress with the assessment and the outputs to be produced. Isa sa mga maximum considerations ng mga guro sa pagpili ng karanasan ay ang mga naaangkop lamang sa kanilang tahanan, pamilya at komunidad, lalo na't panahon ng pandemya. Phase 2 focused on themes and its connections to learning experiences. In Step 5, our teachers are determining the themes to be used in the assessment designs. Teachers select themes that is of interest to students and relevant to the curriculum. Usually, themes used in the materials are based on the value of the content and performance standards. Naniniwala kasi kami na when themes are relevant to students' interest, it will encourage active participation. And with the thematic requirement at hand, learners can closely resemble how real life is experienced outside the school and the classroom. Step 6 help teachers group the learning areas. After teachers decided on a theme to be used in assessment, They group the learning areas accordingly. In grouping the learning areas, teachers consider the real-life learning experiences that will naturally flow with the theme. They even grouped learning areas that were smoothly integrated because of similar concepts. Teachers then connected the learning areas and the learning experiences to thematic experiences in Step 7. The integration of the learning experience to the theme enabled learners to work coherently and holistically. The integration associated whatever they learn from their surroundings to the real-life experiences. It is always a valid concept that when learning experiences are connected to the theme, students are learning in context. After adjustments of learning and thematic experiences, teachers proceed to Step 8. They decided on the activity or output that learners would do to show their ideas and skills from specific thematic context. Teachers here design the most appropriate and most relevant tasks or outputs to be required from the learners. Phase 3 focus on the packaging of learners' assessment materials. In Step 9, teachers prepare the authentic performance guide sheet or the learner's assessment materials. Teachers listed down the activities and steps that learners must do, including the resources needed and the expected learning experiences. After preparing the guide sheets, Step 10 helped teachers on the crafting of assessment tools and rubrics. This is done to indicate achievement criteria across all the components of any kind of learner's work from the thematic assessment. Teachers developed and used rubrics to provide structured performance criteria on the different levels of performance on assessment tasks, outputs, or products. The rubrics help learners generate and justify assessments and allow them to take more responsibility for their learning. Step 11 focused on ensuring the quality and alignment of the learner's materials and its assessment tools. Quality assurance is an important part of the assessment process. This QA process provided feedback to teachers regarding the quality of the developed assessment materials. This process made sure that all elements and contents are aligned to the learning goals and outcomes. The last step that capsulizes the readiness is the packaging of the assessment materials. Step 12 is the last step where teachers organize the learner's assessment materials and ensured that all parts are complete before the delivery of the assessment guide. This is a sample of performance assessment guide developed by teachers that were distributed to learners. This served as a step-by-step guide on the completion of learners' output. Subject area requirements are being merged in one major final product. These are also sample rubrics of different learning area requirements attached to the learner's assessment guide. These rubrics guided learners in the crafting of the output and for teachers in evaluating the outputs. I would like also to share to you the sample products of learners from different schools. These outputs were displayed during the quarterly showcase of learners' outputs, inviting the stakeholders and the parents. The showcase of outputs were done in schools either in virtual or limited face-to-face holdings depending on the community quarantine protocols. In face-to-face gatherings, we ensured that the LGU and BLGUs approved the activities, and we made sure also that there are available health staff to ensure monitoring and implementation of safety health protocols. Para naman makita namin kung may epekto ang nagawa naming inobasyon, nagkaroon naman kami ng evaluation at the end of the school year. The year-end survey was conducted, and it is evident in the results that teachers' experiences as to challenges in the delivery of quality assessment reduced from very challenging to challenging. Teachers claimed that the provision of capacity buildings and mentoring sessions on the development of theme-based assessment helped them and eventually reduced the challenges they experienced in the delivery of authentic performance assessment to measure learners' understanding. According to the teachers, Since thematic assessment provide wide range of assessment tools to learners, they found it to be helpful in ensuring that learners are given the task to freely show their knowledge, skills, and values in the targeted outputs. Teachers also claimed that thematic assessment provided flexible assessment tools to learners, since learners are allowed to choose experiences within their homes and their communities and transform these experiences into tangible outputs and products. The outputs of learners were manifestations that there is an improvement of learning outcomes through the created tangible products. Lastly, thematic assessment realized the provision of academic ease, since learning areas required minimal tasks and output requirements to learners through the integration of subject areas, competencies, and tasks into one major final product. Ayon sa mga guro, nababawasan ang kanilang preparation time and checking time, since nababawasan din ang mga tasks dahil nakapsulize na sa produkto ng mga bata ang iba't ibang learning area requirements. Based on the findings, the following conclusions are laid. First, the gaps and challenges encountered by teachers in the delivery of quality assessment in distance learning were addressed using Pag-asa intervention. Second, thematic assessment using Pag-asa helped teachers design authentic assessment that measures learners' understanding of the competencies. Third, thematic assessment reduced number of performance tasks designed by teachers, since learning area requirements are merged to only one task using themes. And lastly, the thematic assessment reduced the number of outputs required for learners, since learning area requirements are lumped into one final product. In the context of this study, these recommendations may be reconsidered by our department. First, DepEd Central Office may revisit the curriculum design and may integrate thematic context in the contents and performance standards of the curriculum guide. Second, regional offices may promote the culture of using thematic approaches and assist the schools division offices in leading the development of thematic assessment. Third, schools division offices must lead and provide intensive upskilling of teachers and school heads on developing thematic assessment, as well as monitoring and evaluating its effectiveness in schools. Fourth, schools must innovate varied thematic assessment methodologies to ensure quality delivery of authentic assessment to diverse learners. Fifth, teachers must design varied thematic assessment materials that will provide options and choices for learners suited to their capacity or proficiency level. And lastly, researchers may continue conducting similar research to provide a more improved findings and results. Today, we are very happy that one division offices in our region is adopting the use of integrative thematic assessment. By using a more student-focused thematic approach, integrated learning provides opportunities for involving a wide range of students' potentials in the learning process, making learning more meaningful and fun. The quest to quality education is a continuous journey. We need to move forward and see what lies ahead. No research is ever quite complete. It is always a never-ending process para sa ating mga kabataan, para sa ating mahal na bayan.
Ayan. Okay. Maraming salamat po Sir Kaloy sa inyong presentation, ang unang presentation natin this morning. And so nakita po natin, no, based kayo na sa ating Mentimeter, ang one word na nag-describe sa experience ng ating mga teachers ay challenging. And we heard that from the presentation of Sir Caloy. And of course, because of the collaboration between the teachers and the SDO of Surigao del Sur, no, they were able to develop a thematic approach. So nakita po natin kanina, step by step nilatag po ni Sir Caloy ang kung paano ginawa at kung paano utilize yung results ng kanilang research. Ayan. So maraming salamat po for that, Sir Caloy. And I hope everyone learned. We're all excited for the strategies, no, ng assessment. Strategies po ng assessment natin ang hinahanap natin. Nakapin po sa ating comment section ang link. And of course, if you have questions or insights, ibang link po iyon. Nakapin din po iyon sa ating comment section. Just click the link and answer. Excited po kami to engage with you this morning. Ayan. Before we proceed po sa ating next speaker, kasama po natin ngayong umaga ang ating Director ng Planning Service to welcome us and to provide us with his message this morning. So hindi ko na papatagalin pa. Let us welcome Director Roger B. Masapol. Director Roger?
Yeah, magandang umaga sa inyo, Emil, at sa lahat ng nanonood sa buong Pilipinas nitong ating Research O'Clock. We all know that this is the third episode of the Research O'Clock. In the first episode, we look at how the parents manage and struggle on delivering or assisting their kids in their home in the delivery of distance learning. So may nakita tayong mga magagandang nagawa ng mga parents at ng ating collaboration ng school at ng ating parents on making sure that learning happens at home. And then we also listen to some of the testimonies of parents on how they struggle in their role as instant para teachers during the first year of implementation of our distance learning. In the second episode, we look at pedagogical practices. Tiningnan naman natin ngayon ano yung mga ginawa ng mga teachers on navigating the difficulties in delivering the distance learning, through various modalities, di ba, na available sa ating DLCP. Ngayon, may nakita tayong mga good practice at of course, mayroon ding mga best practice that we can say that we can upscale, we can model sa iba't ibang bahagi ng ating bansa at sa lahat ng mga public school sa ibang bansa, sa ibang lugar ng Pilipinas. Now we are in the third episode. Now we are looking at assessment. How do we know that children are learning? How do we know that our kids are getting or acquiring the competencies that they are expected to learn from our MELCs, from our minimum learning competencies, di ba? So tahi-tahi po yan. Yung first episode is how the home, the parents assisted their children in the delivery of education under a distance learning mode. Number two, we look at pedagogical practices of our teachers in the field on how they were able to navigate making the learning happens despite the pandemic. And now we are talking about assessing or assessment of learning outcomes. So how do we know that our learners are actually learning, are getting the right competencies or the expected competencies that they need to get based on our MELC? So I'd like to thank everyone, especially our speakers, for joining us today, for sharing their expertise on this aspect. And of course, especially yung ating mga presenter from the field, because we wanted to know the experience of our people in the field in making sure that distance learning, kasi mag-o-open na po ang klase natin sa September 13, and we are still adapting the similar modalities, but of course we need to lessen the reliance on printed modules. We are encouraging our schools to adapt the TV-based instruction and then the online and then the digital modular. And then, of course, blending all of these distance learning modalities. Just to be not too reliant on the printed modules. Mahirap pong mag-rely on printed modules. Nakita natin yung difficulties of printing, distribution, and the like. So, sa mga, gusto ko lang gamitin itong pagkataon na ito sa mga magulang po na hindi pa nakapag-enroll ng kanilang mga anak. Sa darating na pasukan, kailangan po nating wag nang hintayin yung deadline sa September 12, September 13. Kailangan po ngayon pa lang, within the remaining 2 weeks of enrollment period, we need to to submit the MELSF sa ating mga schools para po makapag-update ng ating mga paaralan sa kanilang LIS in terms of enrollment reporting. So with that, thank you very much everyone, and thank you, Emil, back to you.
Thank you po. Maraming salamat, Director Roger, for that message. Ayan, for also giving us ano ang nangyari during the past 2 weeks and how does it relate, especially now na 2 weeks na lang, pasok na. Tama, Reds, no? Ayan.
Yes, sana nakapag-enroll na ang ating mga anak at mga estudyante.
Ayan, yes. Gandang reminder yon. Maraming salamat doon. And of course, ngayon, hindi na natin papatagalin ulit. Let's proceed to our second presentation. Our second presentation is from our partner in the Assessment Curriculum and Technology Research Center, or ACTRC. She is the Philippine Director of ACTRC, Dr. Marie-Therese Angeline P. Bustos, Dr. Therese. Just a quick background, no? Si Dr. Therese po is a professor of special education at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and she is the former dean of the College of Education. She is also the chair of the Technical Committee for Special Education and a member of the Technical Panel on Teacher Education of the Commission on Higher Education. She is active in research on Philippine Basic Education. Madalas po natin din siyang makatrabaho or makita. Madalas namin siya makatrabaho din. At ang focus niya ay education policy, inclusion, special education, and persons with disabilities. Her research includes incorporating disability in the conditional cash transfer program, several studies on inclusive education under the Philippines response to indigenous peoples and Muslim education, or PRIME program, and papers on special educational needs and disabilities in early childhood and secondary education. This morning, she will share with us about the formative assessment in distance learning. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Therese Bustos. Dr. Therese?
Yes, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. So are you able to hear me?
Yes po.
Great.
Loud and clear.
Great. Maraming salamat ulit sa pag-imbita. So my topic today has to do with formative assessment. So for those of us who are familiar with Department DepEd Order 31, formative assessment takes priority in terms of kinds of assessments, no, that we give for this year, for the pandemic years, no? And so let me explain more about formative assessment. So sana maintindihan natin ito at ang ma-realize natin ay kahit na challenging, kakayanin pa rin. So yun siguro ang gusto kong panimulang mensahe. All right. So familiar na kayo, di ba? You're familiar that there are 2 assessment purposes. And what are they? One is formative, which is the topic today. And then when we use assessment evidence coming from different sources like seat work, recitation, thumbs up, thumbs down, etc., when we use all of those assessment evidence to improve teaching and learning, when we use it to make teaching and learning decisions, because we would like to improve student performance and also improve the way we teach, then that is a formative purpose. So formative assessment yan. So we do that during classes. Again, well, when you put that in juxtaposition with the other one, which is summative, yung summative naman, di ba? Again, you make decisions. However, the decisions that you make have to do with learner outcomes at the end of a given period, like a quarter, diba? So let me show you, just to put in juxtaposition, how we use formative and summative. Because seriously, you can have one assessment tool that can be used formatively and can also be used summatively. Pero just to be able to distinguish one from the other, we need to look at the purpose. So when you want to know where your students are and where they need to be, you want to know the gap. Nandito pa lang sila, doon kami dapat umabot sa competency na yon. Yung gap na yon, malalaman natin yan kung mag-formative assessment tayo. Formative din kapag inaakma natin sa learner's needs. For example, so there are some children who respond well to written tasks, di ba? There are some children who respond better to oral tasks. Then we figure, maybe what would be the best way to find out what they know and what they're able to do. So we're able to make adjustments when we use formative assessment. We are also able to provide feedback. Importante sobra ang feedback kapag formative assessment ang pinag-uusapan. We want also to become better teachers, no? We want to improve instruction. And of course, we want to make sure that our students are engaged even if they're learning from home. So formative assessment can be done at an individual level. You determine those gaps, you adapt to individual needs, you provide individual feedback, etc. But you can also do that at class level, you know, how the students as a whole respond to the different things that you do in the classroom. Now, the other section, the other part shows you summative assessments. And what are they for? They're actually used for grading, for ranking. Again, ranking is something that we don't normally use now. Diba? Even for the bar exams, hindi na daw sila magre-release ng mga top 10. Kasi nga hindi talaga okay ang practice na yan. So we also use summative assessment for reporting purposes when we need to promote students to the next grade level or when we need to produce a certificate or a certification of what a student can do. So note the difference between formative assessment and summative assessment. But what is very important is at the onset, before you do anything, you need to be very clear about the purpose. Importante na alam mo bakit ka nagbibigay ng activity. Kung nagbigay ka ng seat work, bakit ka nagbigay ng seat work? Kung meron kang binigay na gagawa sila ng portfolio, bakit mo ginawa yon? Importante yung pagsagot sa tanong na bakit. So hindi tayo gumagawa ng mga bagay para lang may gawin na bagay. Kasi 'di ba, toxic na nga ngayong panahon na 'to. Kaya dapat very strategic ang ginagawa nating lahat. So hindi tayo nagbibigay ng mga gawain para lang may magawa ang mga bata sa bahay. Hindi 'yun eh. May purpose 'yan. Kaya dapat klarong-klaro sa iyo ano ang purpose nun. Okay. Maraming decisions na kailangan nating gawin. And the boxes that you can see now show you the different questions that we need to be able to answer, whether it's face-to-face or whether in distance learning. When we teach, we need to be able to ascertain if our students have mastered the skill or the competency. So, and if they have mastered the skill or competency, are they really ready to move to the next lesson? So, gusto nating malaman kung magtuturo pa ba tayo, mag-e-explain pa ba tayo, hahanap ba tayo ng paraan para mas malinaw na maintindihan ng estudyante ang lesson. Tapos, kailangan natin malaman, so sino ang may kailangan ng additional support? So, who needs extra support? And we also need to know what method works better for a certain student. We also need to know, for example, when a student answers a question, for example, what method did he use? Kasi pinapakita nun sa atin kung ano yung mga proseso na ginagamit niya. And then, through formative assessment, we are also able to find out areas that are misunderstood, topics that are misunderstood by students, and also things that they have understood. So there are many decisions that we need to make. And I think what is important with this particular slide is, hindi ka lumilipat sa susunod na competency o sa susunod na lesson kung hindi na ma-master ng estudyante yung concept o skill. Dahil ang trabaho natin ay magturo. Hindi natin trabaho na natapusin yung, kasi minsan may mga impression na kailangan tapusin ko lahat. Kasi minsan yun din naman ang sinasabi ng ating mga superiors, no, whoever they are, na tapusin ang budget of lessons, tapusin itong coverage na to. However, formative assessment will tell you if it's time to move on to the next topic or not. Hindi tayo basta yun, tira lang ng tira. Ito, competency 1 today, tomorrow competency 2. Hindi ganon. Kaya tayo nagfo-formative assessment kasi alam natin, iba-iba ang mga estudyante, iba-iba ang kanilang pamamaraan, di ba? Kaya kailangan natin malaman, kailangan natin i-calibrate. Panahon na ba na pumunta sa susunod na lesson? O kailangan ko pa bang mag-dwell dito sa lesson na ito? Ang mga challenges talaga ngayon ay paano mo masasagot ito? Study from home nga, naka-remote learning tayo. Paano natin malalaman? Hindi naman lahat ng bata merong online access. And so many of us would depend, and many of them would depend on the self-learning module. So we need to be able to maximize the use of that self-learning module so that students profit from it. And so my next slide will show you some important considerations that we need to pay attention to, especially that we are doing distance learning. Number 1, instructions, especially in assessment, whatever it is, has to be very clear. Instructions need to be very clear. Why? Well, first, you're not there at home. You're not in your student's house to be able to explain what to do. So whatever material you give the student has to be understood by that student. And I'd like to bring your attention to the language that we use as teachers when writing those modules. Now, remember, when we write the modules, or if not the modules, the activities, please take note of the language level of your students. It is not enough to write something in Filipino. It's not enough to write something in English. We need to be very mindful of what the learner can do in relation to English, in relation to Filipino, or even in relation to mother tongue. You need to look at those in relation to your material. Okay. And so, our suggestion is that if you are, for example, writing materials, assessment materials, self-learning modules, textbooks, etc., for grade 5, please check first what students should be able to do in terms of language in grade 4. Ganun lagi yon. Pag gusto mong malaman kung anong language level dapat ang material mo, isusulat mo yung material sa grade level na mas mababa sa current grade level. So if I'm teaching 3rd grade, and at that time, students should be, they're still learning to read, but they are progressing to a point where they should be at a point where they are reading to learn. So, tinitingnan natin, so pag grade 3, pero ano ang kayang gawin ng grade 2 in terms of language? Now, when we don't pay attention to the language of our modules, what happens is the children will need to depend on their parents to understand the materials that we send them. Okay? The content is a separate thing, no? Sige, content, i-separate muna natin. Pero dapat, kapag may self-learning module, may material, hindi man maintindihan ng bata masyado yung content, kasi bago nga yung content, pero dapat nababasa man lang niya yon. And so for us, who prepare these materials, we need to be very mindful of the language that we use. We use, again, as a guide, look at the curriculum guide for the grade level below the child's grade level. Look for the Filipino expectations, English expectations for the child, one grade level below. And that is the level that you use to make your materials. Hopefully, if you do it this way, then the learner can read the material on his own, on her own. But when we don't pay attention to this, we are actually causing our learners to depend on the adults in their environment to make sense of the modules. So sana malinaw sa atin yon. Oo, kung gusto natin na mas independent ang mga estudyante natin sa pag-aaral nila at hindi yung nanay at tatay nila o kapatid nila ang gumagawa ng assignment o gumagawa ng mga activities, yung mga check for understanding, isulat natin ito sa level na naiintindihan ng learner. Okay? Pangalawa, when we think of assessment methods, we need to take into consideration the context and the resources. So we cannot, for example, and I know DepEd has been very mindful of this. We are aware that not all of our students could be assessed online. Some of them would have to be visited. Some of them would have to take paper and pencil things. And so we need to take into consideration the resources that are available to our students and the context. I think DepEd has tried its best to be very mindful of these contexts. Third, and because our students are learning from home, we don't have a physical presence in their houses. So we need to plan assessment carefully. And so we need to be able to establish the link between the activities that we do, the things, the results that we get from those activities, and the decisions that we need to make. So this means that we need to plan carefully. And as I've said earlier, we don't give just activities just because we need to give activities. With every activity that you give, there is and there should be a purpose. And so whatever evidence that you get from the answers of the students, from the self-learning modules, or from whatever activity that you gave them, you have the connection between that and what decision you need to make should be very clear. For example, if a student, when asked a particular question, can only do this. Halimbawa, nandito lang siya, gusto mo nandito na siya sa taas na to. So dapat klaro na kapag pinakita na nandito pa lang siya, hindi niya naaabot yung competency. So ang decision ko nun, hindi ako pupunta dito. Ang decision ko nun, ituturo ko pa rin ito. And I think this is something that teachers should feel empowered to do. And this is something that administrators and supervisors should allow teachers to do. I know that we have a curriculum that we need to cover, but if we are not able to use formative assessment and let that guide the decisions that we make, then what we will find is that at the end of the day, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, our students will not meet the target outcomes of the K-12 curriculum. And so, because we are studying at home, we're doing distance learning modalities, there has to be a shift of assessment control to the learner, especially if they are older already, or to their caregivers, to their parents, where it is possible. And let me explain this. Pag kayo po ba gumagawa ng self-learning module, di ba marami po kayong nilalagay na activities doon? Di ba sabi natin, ang formative assessment ay kailangan ng feedback. So ibig sabihin, yung feedback na yon ay nasa loob na ng module. Hindi yung feedback na hihintayin pag sinagutan nila, isasubmit nila sa iyo, checkan mo, ibabalik. Matagal yun, di ba? Alam natin na kapag ganon ang style na ginawa natin, linggo ang aabutin bago tayo makakapagbigay ng feedback. And so, in distance learning modalities, we really have to shift assessment control to the learner himself or herself, or to the parents or whoever is with the child at home. How do we do that? The self-learning module has to have the key to the correct answers. The key to correction. Di ba, meron kang activities. Dapat sa likod niyan, nandyan na yung sagot kung ano ang tamang sagot. At sinasabi kung bakit yun ang tamang sagot. Many times, we treat activities in the self-learning module like tests, no? So, kasagutan nila, tapos tinignan mo yung module, hindi nila mahanap yung sagot doon. Walang nagsasabi sa kanila kung ano yung tamang sagot. Again, the activities in the self-learning modules are formative assessment activities. And so, hindi naman sila basehan ng grade. Kaya kung ang nanay pa niyan o kapatid niya nang gumawa, sayang, kasi hindi mo naman ginigradean yun, di ba? Kaya lang, if we give parents, for example, that impression that those are graded, then definitely as a parent, that parent wants wants his or her child to do very well. So kung nakikita niya hindi na kaya na anak ko, ako nang gagawa niyan. But we need to be able to explain to the parent that the self-learning module activities are formative activities, and we use it to gauge what our students are understanding about the lesson. So, again, I will repeat. When you create modules, when you create activities for formative purposes, when you send it home, please make sure that you have the key, the answers to that activity, so that the parent or whoever, or the learner who's, let's say, older, would be able to figure, ito pala yung correct answer. Mali pala yung answer ko. And that is what we mean by shifting assessment control. Hindi na ikaw yung nagko-control kung para malaman ng bata tama o mali ba yung ginawa niya. Hindi. Ibigay na ninyo kung ano yung sagot na tama. Pero syempre, nandun yun sa likod. At siguro may instructions. Tingnan nyo lang yan pag nasubukan nyo ng sagutin ito. At kailangang malinaw na malinaw sa mga magulang kung ano yung purpose niyang self-learning module na yan. Kasi, alam mo naman sa atin, di ba? Basta nakasulat, tapos ang forma pa ay kamukha ng test, akala nila summative assessment. When in reality, you just want to know what the student can do so that you can adjust instruction. So, minsan nga niloloko namin yung ibang mga magulang. O sige, kayo ang sumagot niyan, kayo ang sumagot niyan. Dahil ang iisipin ko, naintindihan pala talaga ng bata. Kaya pag nag-test na, minsan lumalabas, hindi pala alam ng bata. Kaya lang, parang naloko tayo dahil doon sa ating formative activities, si mama pala ang gumagawa. So, kailangan maintindihan ng mga magulang kung ano ang purpose para isipin na nila na, okay lang palang hindi ako ang sumagot nitong self-learning module. Hindi naman pala gigradean to ni teacher. Gusto lang niyang malaman kung ano na yung alam ng anak ko. Yun. Kapag hindi malinaw yan, don't be surprised that parents will try to answer the modules themselves. Sino ba naman ang hindi gagawa nun? Minsan ine-equate pa ng magulang na pagmamahal sa kanilang anak ang pagsagot ng learning module. Kahit na alam natin na ito ay kakaibang paraan ng pagpapakita ng pagmamahal. Okay. And so paano mo mga malalaman kung yung nanay pala ang gumagawa ng homework o yung tatay o kung sino man yung lola o tita, kung sino man yung nandun sa bahay? paano mo malalaman kung ano na talaga yung alam ng bata? And this is where we suggest using informal formative assessment conversations. So ano ba yung informal formative assessment conversations? Okay, are you able to see? Are you able? Yes, you can see. Okay, so this is the model for conversation-based formative assessment. Ang tawag namin yan for short, ESRU, ESRU. So what does that mean? So nag-uusap ang teacher at estudyante. Kanina, nakita ko dun sa Mentimeter response nyo, some of you really call your students. And that is a good practice because that's a great way to have check-ins. I also know of some teachers, pag medyo malapit lang, minsan dumadaan lang doon sa may bandang bahay ng bata, nagtatanong, pero hindi nagtatagal. And those are excellent opportunities to have short conversations. So pag sinasabi kong conversation, hindi ko sinasabi na matagalang conversation ito. And these are very short conversations. By the way, this is a practice that you can do when we go back to face-to-face. But for now, you can also do it when you call your student. So what is in the ESRU model? First, you elicit a response. So the teacher elicits a response. And what does that mean? So you can ask a question, and then what will happen? The student will respond. So nagtanong ka, sasagot yung estudyante. But note, it doesn't stop there. You will ask, listening now to the answer of the student, you will recognize the student response, and then you're going to use that response to ask another question, to probe further. Okay? This particular model, again, the ESRU, I will repeat again the steps. The teacher elicits a response, asks a question. The student answers. The teacher listens to the answer and then uses that answer to ask another question or to give a response. So ang tawag dyan, ESRU model of informal formative assessment. And so, let me just show you an example. Diba? Try to remember ESRU model. Okay, ESRU model. Okay. So, for example, you want your students had a reading activity and you want the students to figure out who the main character of the story is. So diba una, the teacher elicits a response. So the teacher can ask the question. Halimbawa, nabasa mo na ba yung natin, yung kwento? So, were you able to read the story? Yes. Okay. So who is the main character in the story? So that's, diba, elicit a response. So the student now will answer. Let's say, Maria is the character of the story. So sumagot na. So the student responds. Now, some of us would just say, wow, very good. Good answer. And then stop there. No. When you use the ESRU model, you will ask another question. So you asked already, so what's the main character in the story? And then, yes, Maria is the main character in the story. So, but what makes you think that she is the main character of the story? Or what makes you think that they are the main characters of a story? And then that the student answers again. So I'm going to go back to the model. So, umiikot yan. Hindi pwedeng teacher elicits a response, students respond, end of conversation. No, you use the student's response to recognize, you use it, you recognize it, and then you use the response to ask another question, to probe further, so that you have a better understanding of what your student really knows. And then another question that can be asked is, so if you have another story, not just this story about Maria, how do readers know who the main character is? So you can ask questions, you can probe and probe further. However, It doesn't really have to be a long conversation, as I've said. So let me show you now the types of answers that can be given. Okay, so in terms of feedback, di ba? Who is the main character of the story? So answer, yes. So the child says Maria. And then the teacher answers, yes, Maria is the main character of the story. Eh di okay lang yan. That kind of feedback is called task level feedback. However, di ba sabi natin, we don't just end there. We need to probe further kasi nga kailangan mo malaman, okay, I need to know where my student is and if he or she is ready to go to the next lesson. And so I can respond and focus now on the process. Okay, so maybe the student gave you a reason. So how do you know, let's say earlier we asked, so how do you know who is the main character? And maybe the student said, the main character is mentioned in the story many times. You know, maybe that's the right answer or the wrong answer. But then I can ask more. What other things do you look for when identifying the main character? So hindi ako tumitigil. Talagang nagpo-probe ako. And that kind of a focus, a feedback, is called process. It focuses on process. It's process level feedback. The highest type of feedback is the self-regulation type of feedback where we expect our students to be more independent. So for example, in the material that they read, they already have listed the requirements of for identifying who the main character is. And so, okay, so using the list, can you see whether you considered all the criteria? So note, you will see green dots for task, process, and regulation. And those are very important because this is the type of feedback that students need so that they know if they're doing things right and where they need to go. Okay? The last one, which is the self-level feedback, which is like, good job. You know, it's fine to be saying, good job, good work. But aside from saying that, what does that give you? Nothing. Maybe just an affirmation that you're good. But it doesn't help the student move from one level to another. And that's why when we give feedback, we need to make sure that we need to show where the student is. Parang, ito na yung alam mo, pero ito pa yung pupuntahan natin eh. Ito pa yung, kaya ka nagtatanong, so what other things do you look for when identifying the main character? Kaya tayo nagtatanong yan, kasi nga gusto natin, hindi lang yung yes, no, correct, wrong. But we want to use the feedback to help the child get to where we want him or her to go in terms of the learning competency. So while saying good job is fine, note that I placed there a red dot because if that is the kind of feedback that we give our students on the activities that they give us, that feedback will not get us far. Feedback that achieves results are either of a task, process, or self-regulation type. And so, when we looked at teachers, when in the research of ACT-RC, when we looked at teachers and how they were using and giving feedback based on the students' response, so note the different levels. So, diba? So, syempre pag 0, you're not yet at level 1. But if you're a teacher, if you're a teacher who gives information about the task or product, you're in level 1. But if you're a teacher who talks about the process, then you're a level 3 type of teacher already. And then if you're giving feedback that focus on self-regulation, which enables students to evaluate their own process, you're a level 4 teacher. So in our research, most of our teachers are at level 1. Nandun lang sila sa correct, wrong, correct, incorrect. But again, if we want our students to benefit from formative assessment and the feedback that we give them, we need to focus on giving feedback on the task, the main process, and self-regulation processes. Okay, I need to wrap up, but this is going to be my last slide. So the conversations don't have to be very long, but you need to prepare for them. So you will find that there are 1-minute conversations, 60-second conversations to check your students' understanding. But you need to prepare for this because you need to have a checklist of topics as well as the indicators that show you if the student meets the proficiency level that's being targeted. So you choose a time when to call your student or when to pay your student a visit if that is allowed. And then you start that conversation. So call the student, start that conversation. Start simple and then progress to more specific questions following SRU. Keep it quick, madali lang. Wag masyadong matagal. And then, but make it specific. And then take note of this because this 60-second conversation will tell you where your students are. And that is what formative assessment is for us. That is something that we can do during this pandemic when students learn using the distance learning mode. So maraming salamat po and I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tirs, no, sa isang sa pagbabahagi ng inyong makabuluhang okay. Ayan, makabuluhang presentation patungkol sa formative assessment in distance learning. Ayan, ang ganda po ng nasabi ni Dr. Tiris no, na kahit na mahirap kakayanin at nabigyan niya rin ng pagkakaiba yung difference ng formative sa summative assessment at dapat nating alamin yung ating mga assessment purpose na align sa current distance learning modalities ng mga bata. Okay, so ayun no, we would like to reiterate again yung ating for questions no, yung Padlet link, and pwede rin po kayong mag-comment diyan sa ating live stream sa comment section for your questions. Ilagay niyo lang po yung inyong address niyo lang po yung question niyo sa ating mga guest speaker, and meron po tayong isang another Padlet link for sharing of classroom strategies. Okay. And now let us proceed to our third speaker. Our third presentation is from DepEd's Bureau of Learning Delivery. Siya po ay si Sir Joseph Randolph Palataw. Si Sir Joseph po ay isang Supervising Education Program Specialist mula sa Teaching and Learning Delivery ng Bureau of Learning Delivery ng DepEd. Bago po dito, siya po ay naging mathematics teacher at nagsilbi bilang isang Mathematics Department Coordinator sa isa sa mga public elementary school sa Quezon City. Siya rin po ay nakapagtapos ng may Latin Honors from the Philippine Normal University Manila with a degree of Bachelor of Elementary Education with concentration in Mathematics, Science, and English. He received a postgraduate diploma in education, specializing in teaching primary school mathematics and Science at Nanyang Technological University sa Singapore under ng LEAP program or Leaders and Educators in Asia program. Ito po ay in partnership with Ateneo de Manila. He was also granted an Australia Award Scholarship noong 2015 through he was able to take his master's degree in education sa University of Melbourne naman po sa Australia at nakapagtapos ng upper second class honors. Siya po ay may mga membership sa iba't ibang professional organization including Mathematics Teachers Association of the Philippines Incorporated and National Council of Teachers of Mathematics in the USA. So para magbahagi po tungkol sa assessment during distance learning, insights, prospects, let us all welcome Sir Joseph Palataw. Sir Joseph.
Hello, magandang umaga. Maraming salamat sa introduction, Sir Tidem at Sir Emil. Of course, maraming salamat din sa pag-invite sa akin, no, dito sa third episode ng Research of Law focusing on assessment. And narinig nyo kanina yung mga strategies na pinresent mula sa una at sa pangalawang presentation. So ngayon, dito sa short presentation ko, magpo-focus lang ako basically dun sa ano ba yung mga insights na pwede nating malaman in relation to how assessment is done and how assessment can be further done to support distance learning. Okay. Just a moment. I think I'm gonna share my slides first. Ito na lang i-share ko. Can you see my slide?
Yes po.
Yeah, okay. All right. So I think it's important to start this presentation by knowing where we are in terms of our academic performance, no. And of course, I'll be citing recent reports from international large-scale assessments. But before that, tingnan muna natin kasi nga, di ba, we're under a public health crisis, and nakita nga natin doon sa menti kanina, no, na yung pinakamalaking word na lumabas agad, challenging. And yes, I definitely agree na the past school year and I think pati itong upcoming school year will is really challenging for all of us. Actually, hindi pa nga nag-start yung school year last year, naging challenging na for everybody because of a variety of preparations that we had to make. Hindi lang sa part ng schools, no, but everyone, mula sa central office hanggang sa regional offices, school division offices, and down to the school. So a lot of preparations had to be done to ensure that learning continues despite the pandemic, no. And as I said, if you look at the academic performance of the Philippines prior to the pandemic, we can already see here dun sa pinapakita ko na the diagram that we were already lagging behind, no? If we look at math and science scores. Okay. So the distribution that you're seeing here represents scores in international large-scale assessments for countries in the East Asia and the Pacific. However, yung data dito ng Philippines just limited to TIMSS during that time. Okay? Because when the World Bank released the report having this or containing this figure, yun pala yung available data natin sa ngayon. As you can see here, I think Philippines, no? So sa portion ng mga below average performing countries, the Philippines is actually here. Sa talagang almost dulo na ng ating normal curve. And if you look at the difference between the average scores of the below average performing systems and the above average performing systems, we can see that the difference between the averages is actually 106 points. And it's not as simple as that na difference. Na ano bang ibig sabihin na difference ng 106 points? It means that, or this means that yung performance sa mga bata dito sa below average performing countries are actually 3.5 years behind than those in the above average performing systems. Ibig sabihin yan, a grade 5 student here in the Philippines are actually manifesting knowledge and skills na hanggang, at most pang grade 3 lang. Diba? Grade 3 or even grade 2. And I think most of you or most of the teachers here will be able to relate that when, for example, when it comes to mathematics, na they'll be reaching grade 6 na hindi nila kayang mag-add or subtract, much more pa yun, no? Yung mag-multiply and mag-divide proficiently. Even if they can do so, limited lang yung kaya nilang gawin, no? So this is what this disparity means. And again, itong situation na to, this is prior to the pandemic, and this is prior to the international large-scale assessments that we participated in the past 3 years. And if we look at our scores dito sa mga ILSAs na ito, 4. So the table that you're seeing here is the performance of the East Asian countries that participated in the TIMSS that year. And yeah, among these countries, we're actually dead last in math and science. Okay? So parang pag minatch natin siya dun sa normal curve kanina, imagine 16 years after, and ito pa rin yung ano natin, no, yung nakikita. So it's possible na we might have improved maybe as the years went by, pero syempre hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na hindi naman nag-i-improve yung iba ring countries. So the more the other countries are improving also, syempre, at tapos tayo medyo mabagal ang improvement, lalong lumalaki of course yung disparity in terms of performance. And thus you can see here nga sa mga scores in this table. And lastly, in the CPLM also conducted in 2019, this focus on grade 5 learners, and there are actually 6 Southeast Asian countries participated in that study. And among these, you can see here that we are ranked 5 in terms of reading, writing, and mathematics. Okay. So in all of these ILSAs, it's very obvious that there's a pattern na in relation to a given average in that study, mababa talaga yung performance natin, or we're performing below average. Okay? And again, as I mentioned kanina, this is the pre-pandemic situation. So what more pa ngayon na disrupted yung ating schooling because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Diba? So if students, if our grade 4 and 5 learners and even our 15-year-olds are having trouble already prior to the pandemic, paano pa kaya yung situation natin ngayon? So basically, sabihin natin na anyway, ano naman to international assessment naman ito. Iba pa rin yung nangyayari sa loob ng classroom, at the local level or the classroom level. Yes, I will definitely agree na syempre iba't iba yung context, But it's important for us to understand yung value nitong nakikita nating data na to, because this provides us a good picture nung starting points sa mga bata natin. Yes, grades 4, 5, and maybe grade 9 and 10 learners lang yung cover nitong mga ILSAs. But then again, hindi naman ibig sabihin na to na yung natutunan lang nila ng grade level lang na yun ang kailangan tingnan natin. Definitely, their performance in these ILSAs were influenced by how much their foundational skills were developed in the previous grade levels. And that's basically our starting point. And so what do these results mean to us? And well, actually, the better question to ask is, what should these results mean to us? Okay, so whether we are teachers, school heads, supervisors, or policymakers, it's important for us to really understand these sets of data that we're getting, because these gives us a glimpse of how our learners are faring. Kasi even if these are, again, international assessments, much of their performance in these assessments will come from what they have learned inside the classroom. Okay, so these results gave us a very good reminder that 1 year of input equals 1 year of growth. I'm echoing this important statement said by Dr. John Hattie, who is a famous educationist and researcher. And he argues that, of course, for expecting 1 year of growth, there should be enough inputs given to our learners. And as you can see in our data, the ILSAs, yung pinakita ko sa inyo just now, parang hindi enough yung growth na nakukuha ng mga bata each year. Okay? And again, that I will raise that question na paano pa kaya ngayon that learners are learning at home, diba? The teachers have reported struggling in providing sufficient instruction for their children. Okay, so while these data provide a good picture of our Filipino children's learning outcomes, we can also use this information to initiate discussions no on critical issues relative to teaching, learning, and assessment. Kaya mahalaga din na meron tayong ganitong episode on assessment. Kasi this is one of those events or platforms in which we can do these conversations or have these discussions about what should be done to improve teaching and learning and assessment in schools, and also to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the whole education system. And lastly, these results actually provide us an opportunity to reflect on our current initiatives and redefine key priorities and strategies for improving learning delivery, just now made more relevant due to COVID-19. Okay. This next slide that I'm showing you shows us or presents the data coming from the Philippine COVID-19 monitoring survey conducted by World Bank sometime last year. And they found out after, I think, 2 rounds of their study that these are all these are barriers to effective distance learning. But among these barriers, the top 3 major barriers that they were able to identify are limited access to gadgets and internet, the child's inability to focus, and stress due to COVID-19. Okay, I think this is not surprising anymore because we've heard a lot of stories already mula pa nung last year nung nag-start yung pandemic na for example, sa focus, maraming modules na sinasagutan, hindi na kaya ng bata ma-schedule sa loob ng isang araw kung ano yung uunahin niya. Ganun din pagdating sa mga performance tasks na there are 8 learning areas, and even if there's the DepEd order on DepEd order number 31 to be specific, we've still heard some reports na isa-isa pa rin ang bigay ng mga performance tasks or mga assessment tasks to our children. So definitely, if there's too much to work on, if their plates are too full, para para magawa yung work nila, then definitely their motivation gets affected, and of course their focus will be affected also, and that will be actually related to the stress that they are encountering, so ito actually yung stress na to pwedeng manggaling from different things. Pwede kasi na through studies, or pwedeng family matters, di ba? Pwedeng financial matters. So there are a lot of factors na pwede nating tingnan ano tong mga stressors na to. But then again, this is a set of data that's important for us also to understand, and I would encourage our viewers to look for this report, and they have this report already, and I encourage you to read on this para makita nyo rin how can you make better decisions in your school this coming school year, especially that preparations are ongoing. Now, given those barriers, ano ba kasi yung makakapag establish ng academic success in distance learning? Of course, because there's reduced instructional time between the teacher and the parents, the teacher and the learners, and there's increased instructional time naman between the learner and the parents. Kailangan nating makita din yung role ng ibang aspects or role ng ibang factors that could actually affect the learning outcomes while learning at home. And one of those is self-regulated learning. Okay? The ability of the learners to regulate their own learning processes. And this could mean setting their own goals, setting achievable goals, managing their time and the tasks given to them, monitoring their own progress, regulating their motivation, and seeking help when necessary, especially this last one. Okay? Dahil nga syempre, hindi naman all the time kaya nila makontak yung teacher, lalo na kung sa mga lugar na mahina yung internet. So definitely, they will need to look for help from other people who are more knowledgeable than them. Pwedeng yung parents yun, pwedeng yung mga kapatid nila, pwede naman yung neighbors nila, pwede din naman yung mga classmates din nila. Pero syempre, dahil nga sa protocols natin, of course, less lang yung yung contact dapat between people. So malaki yung role ng technology dito in how to support learners in terms of communicating with their peers and their more knowledgeable others. Yeah. And then second factor is yung perceived competence. No? If the students don't see themselves being competent or they don't feel competent enough to finish the tasks and the activities, then definitely bababa yung kanilang intrinsic motivation. Okay? If they see their modules, no? Pag-usapan natin yung modules kasi I think a large proportion of our learners are under the modular learning modality. So if you look at the modules themselves, the way they are designed, if these resources do not allow students to choose kung alin yung mga activities na fit dun sa learning nila and they are forced to do all the activities in the module, then definitely mafe-feel talaga nila na mabigat yung ginagawa nila kasi pwedeng may 3 activities sa module pero yung isa sobrang dali na, kaya nang gawin yun ng bata kahit na nakapikit. So ano ba yung pinaka-important na gawin niya given let's say only 1 hour for this subject? Then definitely these should be tasks that are relevant and appropriate dun sa developmental level ng bata. Okay? And I'm already linking this with the concept mentioned in DepEd Order number 8, Series 2015, which is Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. When we say zone of proximal development, this is the area in which there's a 50-50 chance na magsasucceed yung bata. Okay? If we give exercises to our children na kaya nilang gawin on their own and then there's 100% chance na maging successful sila, tapos lahat ng activities dun sa module ay ganun din, and then paano natin sila ma-challenge? No? Paano natin sila mapupush na to go beyond their limits in preparation for the next lesson or for the next module? Okay? So we have to make sure that when we design our activities, in relation na rin sa sinabi ni Teacher Therese kanina, no, na part yun ng formative assessment. So the activity should be able to allow the learners to send the message to the learners na okay, you're done with this. I don't think you need this activity already. You can proceed to the to a related task na within your current ability, something like that. Then of course with appropriate feedback from the module din. Kung walang sufficient time or kung hindi makakapagbigay agad ng feedback yung teacher, tama si Dean Therese kanina doon na the modules themselves should be able to provide immediate feedback to the learners. So going back to this slide, so if the learners don't see themselves competent enough to finish the tasks within their modules or in their learning activity sheets or whatever learning resource that they have, then their motivation will be stifled, it will be affected. And then of course, self-regulation will also be affected. No? Kasi kung wala silang motivation, then they will not be able to see themselves as capable of setting their own goals, managing their time. They will not be able to monitor their own progress because they are not, or they don't have the necessary tools to do so, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then one other factor also that we have to be aware of is yung passive procrastination. Malamang alam na natin no, ano ibig sabihin ng procrastination, and siguro we do this all the time, especially when there's so many things to do and we want to rest muna. So we tend to put off things for later. Diba? But there are 2 types of procrastination kasi there's active and passive procrastination. Yung active procrastination, yun yung kakabanggit ko ngayon lang na we're motivated to do something naman, but because we need to to rest muna and tingin naman natin may enough time na to prioritize other things muna para then for our mental health, for example, then natin siya, parang ginagawa natin siya as part of our self-regulation strategy. Okay? But when we say passive procrastination, ito yung pagde-delay ng tasks. kahit alam natin na may negative na mangyayari sa atin, no, like pabagsak yung student or what. So ibig sabihin, kung punong-puno na siya sa mga gagawin niya, then this will result to passive procrastination, and consequently, that will result to modules not being finished on time, tapos hindi niya mabibigay yung hindi niya masasubmit yung mga modules niya or even yung other mga assessment tasks on time sa mga teacher. So syempre si teacher din ay stress din kasi may schedule siya ng pagmamark, pagbibigay ng feedback, and but of course because of academic ease, we have to be lenient to our learners. However, yun nga, napupush din, no, or namumove din yung ating mga schedule. So yeah, this basically explains, no, yung challenging situation natin, no, na experience nating lahat, especially ng mga teachers and the learners itong past school year. And if this is not addressed, then definitely same pa rin yung ma-experience itong paparating na school year. Pero of course, it's safe to assume naman na we've learned so much already in the past school year that we might have already established some sort of mechanisms and some other strategies na that would make the implementation of distance learning better and more effectively for this school year. Okay, so because we want to support distance learning, we want to support more effective implementation of distance learning this coming school year. Again, hindi na tayo nagkukulang when it comes to policies, no? When it comes to benchmarking, we have DepEd Order Number 29, Series 2017, focusing on system assessment, specifically the implementation or the participation rather in ILSAs. We also have DepEd Order Number 55, Series 2016, which contain the policy guidelines on national assessments. And at the classroom level, we have DepEd Order Number 8, Series 2015, and the one we issued last year prior to the start of the school year, which is DepEd Order Number 31, Series 2020, the interim policy guidelines on assessment and grading in light of the basic education learning continuity plan. And if we really want to strengthen classroom assessment this coming school year, if you were able to strengthen it already in the past school year and you're looking forward or looking towards or aiming towards strengthening further your assessment practice this coming school year, we have to see assessment as part of the pedagogical process. Okay, that should be our mindset, no? Hindi dapat mag-move away na tayo from thinking about assessments as tools. Now, this is a set of a set of 5-item multiple choice items na ibibigay sa bata. Then mag-iintay lang tayo ng score sa babalik, then that's it. Okay? If we treat assessment as part of the pedagogical process, we're extending beyond the design and implementation of these assessments and towards the use of assessment results to improve teaching and learning. Okay? So what you're seeing here is actually the dynamic process of classroom assessment, or the dynamic relationship of classroom assessment with all the other things that we should be cognizant of when planning instruction. Okay, so of course we have to be very knowledgeable about the curriculum expectations, diba? Yung mga learning targets noon through the MELCs, and then we also have to be knowledgeable about the learning theories that our strategies or our pedagogical strategies or approaches rather are grounded on. And of course, these three should be able to influence the way we plan and design teaching and learning sequences, and of course our assessment tasks. Okay, see, as you can see here. So of course at this moment, or in the current distance learning setup, much of the instructional time is basically self-directed, no? So kung modular learning yan, yung instructional time is between the learner and the SLMs that they have in front of them, or even the learning activity sheets that support the modules. If your context allows online parang online sessions or synchronous lessons. Of course, yan pwedeng magawa yung teacher-led or peer-mediated na mga experiences. But then again, whether you design a teacher-led, peer-mediated, or self-directed learning experience, hindi dapat makalimutan yung design mismo ng classroom assessment, putting a balance between formative and summative assessments. And so we have to remember yung guideposts natin, no, as stipulated in DepEd Order number 31, that assessment should be holistic and authentic in capturing the MELCs. Assessment is integral for understanding student learning and development. So basically, assessment should be treated as the core, or assessment should be at the heart of teaching and learning. Okay, it should not only be seen as something that, it should be seen as something supportive to teaching and learning. But again, kailangan ma-emphasize sa atin, no, na assessment should be at the heart of teaching and learning, because through assessment, we'll be able to determine the necessary steps to improve teaching and learning in our classroom, whether that's physical or virtual. Third, a variety of assessment strategies is necessary, with formative assessment taking priority. And Ma'am Therese already highlighted in her previous presentation ano yung mga different ways that we can do assessment formatively with our students. Fourth, assessment and feedback should be a shared responsibility among teachers, learners, and their families. And assessment and grading should have a positive impact on learning. We conducted an initial survey around March this year, and we asked, there's one question there in our initial study na tinanong namin yung mga teachers, no, aling components nung DepEd Order number 31 yung nagustuhan nila. And among the given options there, the emphasis on formative assessment was highly valued by 82% of the teacher respondents, followed by the inclusion of the annexes around, I think, if I remember correctly, around 11%. No? So, makikita natin na based on that, based on this information, nakikita natin na marami na nagva-value dun sa importance ng formative assessment in the teaching and learning process. However, if you look at this data coming from a research project conducted by the Assessment Curriculum and Technology Research Center back in 2016, majority of the teachers in their sample, composed of 59 teachers, manifested around levels 1 and 2 lang, no, na formative assessment practice. Ano ba ibig sabihin ng levels 1 and 2? Well, just to be brief about this, pag level 1 kasi, kung ano yung nasa lesson, yun yung tatapusin. Diba? So, dahil sa nagmamadali ka, kung may questions man yung bata, pwedeng sabihin na that's for tomorrow na lang. Basta as long as yung focus si teacher ay matapos kung ano yung nakalagay sa lesson plan niya. Yung level 2 practice naman is si teacher mag-entertain ng questions, and if there are some misconceptions, ina-address naman niya. So ito na yung ginagawa ni teacher na incidental teaching, di ba? However, kulang pa din, no, sa opportunities for peer assessment and self-assessment within that lesson. And these are practices na ginagawa na at levels 3 and 4. Okay? So again, this research was done prior to the pandemic, and if a good number or if majority of the teachers in this sample are already manifesting levels 1 and 2 na formative assessment practice, then definitely mas nahirapan, no, yung marami pang mga teachers, if not all the teachers had difficulties implementing formative assessment nitong nakaraan na school year. Okay? And so what's really important for us is to come up with the necessary strategies para maging mas responsive dun sa needs ng mga learners natin. In the Teaching and Learning Division under the Bureau of Learning Delivery, we're developing, some of the projects are ongoing already, but we're currently developing this portfolio of projects focused on supporting assessment for learning and teaching, which is basically this is actually the title or the name of the project. And the aim of this of these projects are to basically enhance assessment practices in the schools. So our targets are the following. Number one, to provide instructional and professional learning resources to our schools, to make available professional development opportunities that are focused on formative assessment, and also 21st century skills development, because we cannot just focus only on yung the usual lang na mga domains of learning, but we also have to prepare our learners. Kahit sabihin natin challenging siya sa distance learning, we still have to prepare them kung ano yung mga expectations for them in this current ano yung mga value rather pala ng mga skills and knowledge in our society. And of course, thirdly, yung establishment ng communities of practice. Kasi I always believe na gasgas na nga yung statement na no man is an island, and definitely that's still true sa context natin, lalo na if teachers are left to prepare materials ng individually, sila definitely makakaramdam sila ng matinding stress, matinding pressure, matinding pagod. So if there's a community of practice within the school pa lang muna, then pwedeng magtulungan yung teachers to come up with their own learning and assessment resources for their children. Okay, and so we hope that if we are able to meet these targets in the coming years, there will be increased buy-in for formative assessment, meaning tataas yung appreciation ng importance of formative assessment in our schools, specifically in the teaching and learning process. There will be increased knowledge of formative assessment, disciplinary content, and related learning outcomes. And as I mentioned, that includes the 21st century skills. And lastly, increased quality and frequency of intentional and ongoing use of formative assessment. So in the long run, we expect that the projects that we're doing, or we're conceptualizing, we hope to develop in the future, will result in the increased proportion of learners meeting and even exceeding grade level standards in all learning areas. And we hope that, of course, ma-demonstrate ito dun sa succeeding pa ng mga runs ng international large-scale assessments and even yung mga national assessments natin. Second, increase teacher quality across grade levels and learning areas. Of course, we are not doing this in isolation from the Philippine professional standards for teachers and also the standards for school heads and the supervisors. Definitely, we will not only be supporting teacher practices, but also supporting then supporting then also our school heads and our supervisors how to support teachers in the schools. And lastly, increase professional development around instructional needs of teachers and learners based on the evidences that we have. Okay? And so at present, siguro maganda lang i-highlight ko, isi-segue ko lang ito, kasi I've heard some feedback from some teachers na hindi sila aware na meron palang classroom assessment resource book na kasama yung DepEd Order number 31. And so I'm showing you here now ito yung enclosure dun sa DepEd Order na yon. So sa mga viewers natin ngayon, if you're not aware na meron palang carb dun sa ating DepEd Order, yes, meron tayo. And while this was developed prior to the pandemic, you will still be able to get a lot of information, and you will be able to use many of the tools here para i-tailor fit nyo siya in your respective context. And then the one you're seeing at the right is an ongoing project with ACT-RC, and we're co-developing a formative assessment guide for self-learning, formative assessment guide in self-learning modules for SLM writers. Okay. Now, what's in store for us in the coming months or even in the coming years? Well, for one, we'll be conducting a formative assessment training for K-3. Actually, this will happen, the first run will happen next week in collaboration with Research Triangle Institute, International, and Australian Council for Educational Research. As I mentioned, we're co-developing a formative assessment guide for SLM writers with ACT-RC. And so to roll this out, we'll be conducting a formative assessment training for SLM writers. And lastly, we'll also be initiating a performance task development project focused on the integration of 21st century skills in these assessment tasks. Only focusing on Key Stage 2 for now, but of course, in the long run, we intend to populate or create a repertoire, or actually, to be more specific, a reservoir of assessment tasks for all key stages and for all grade levels. Okay. So I'm about to wrap up, and again, I think it would be crucial to end this presentation by looking at how we can sustain effective teaching, learning, and assessment practices. Okay? I'm focusing on sustainability because hindi naman tayo dapat mag-focus lang dun sa ano yung context natin, but we also have to prepare already yung situation after the public health crisis. Because anyway, whether there's a pandemic or not, the assessment principles will still hold, and we have to uphold our commitment to apply these principles in our practice. Okay, so in the coming school year, I think we should veer away from parang identifying yung learning losses. Okay, and because it's only emphasizes a deficit mindset. And so what's more important is to have a growth mindset and determine what learners need right now. Okay, so we focus on learners who are underachieving, learners who have met the standards in the previous grade level, and learners who have actually exceeded the expectations. Okay? If we are able to cater to all of these students, then at least we can say to ourselves that we are doing enough for our children, as long as our efforts are coordinated. No, again, we don't have to do this on your own. You don't have to do this by yourself. You can collaborate with your teachers in your respective grade levels, or siguro mas maganda, no, take a whole school approach in your collaboration. That's why if we consider teaching as a design science, kasi we've heard so many times that teaching is an art, no, at hindi natin nabibigyan ng pansin yung notion of teaching as a science. And so if we consider teaching, and of course assessment also, as a design science, then nagkakaroon tayo ng responsibility to make sure that we act on the evidences that we are getting about our students, so that we can further improve our practice. And it's important that we go through repetitive or iterative cycles of teacher collaborative inquiry. So whatever information you get about your students through your assessments, whether that's written or through your performance tasks, kailangan magamit nyo yun to support your planning decisions. Diba? So whatever you plan, siguro magandang i-innovate nyo siya. If you've learned something new in a, let's say from this episode, or siguro sa iba pang mga sa ibang mga webinars na attend ninyo, magandang i-test nyo siya, di ba? You plan pa na siya i-implement, you test, and then reflect on the results, on your experience, and then share your experience with other colleagues. Okay? So I think this is one of the most important thing that we should do right now if we want to make sure that distance learning in our schools continue to be effective in our respective contexts. And of course, I would like to encourage everyone that kung gusto niyo, if you're very keen to share your experiences nung last year, kahit itong this year, no, if you plan to implement a new assessment strategy and you want to share later on, no, kung ano yung experience niyo, you want to share your findings, please feel free to share it with us and email us at dld.tld@deped.gov.ph. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that very insightful presentation, Sir Joseph. So ayan, nakita natin kanina, no, yung presentation ni Sir Joseph ay patungkol sa ilan sa pre-pandemic Philippine performance sa mga international assessment, at ano ba yung ibig sabihin nito para sa atin, na kailangan nating mag-reflect sa ating mga current initiative to improve the teaching and learning delivery. Na-emphasize din yung assessment ay kailangan holistic and authentic. At syempre, kailangan ito ay dapat yung heart of teaching and learning. Ayan, and right now, before we proceed to our open forum, magbasa muna tayo ng ilang insights mula sa ating audience mula sa FB Live at sa Padlet Wall. Okay, I think this one ay para sa lahat ng ating presenter. So, very inspiring and motivational daw po yung sharing with regards to effective assessment in distance learning. Maraming salamat daw po sa ating sa tatlong presenter. And for this one, another insight mula sa Padlet. Ito po ay anonymous. Ayan. We are so happy and proud that we are one of the pioneers of this thematic-based approach and performance assessment. Ito po ay para kay Sir Kaloy. Ito po ay isa sa mga strategies daw na in-implement sa Surigao Division wherein most learning competencies within the quarter were grouped together and integrated in one team. And another insight, I think this one is for Dr. Therese. Ayan. Thank you very much po for sharing. I learned many ideas about the different types of feedback and how it will be used in distance learning. So ayun po, kung may mga insights pa po kayo, pwede pa po kayong maglagay sa ating Padlet wall at babasahin po ng ating mga guest speakers and presenters and of course, sa side po namin. And now, ayan.
Ayan. Salamat, Teds. Ayan, salamat po sa mga insights natin. At ngayon naman, tingnan natin, Teds, yung kanilang sinulat na mga shared strategies nila bago tayo mag-proceed sa open forum. Yung mga nakuha natin sa Padlet, kung pwede nating i-share ngayon sa ating screen. Yung mga nakuha natin sa Padlet, ayan, sige. I-zoom natin pero nababasa natin siya ngayon. Ang iba dito, nag-use ng different platforms kagaya ng YouTube, Google, DepEd Commons, Canva, iba't ibang platforms to supplement the needs of my students. Ang iba po, may ginawang group chat for my advisory class para makapag-communicate sa kanila at makapagtanong ng feedback, ask questions related to our topic. Ayan. Meron ding plan and communication ng strategies with learning partners, yung mga co-teachers, parents, and guardians natin. Ayun. So may mga language games dyan just to check. May mga ginagamit sila like Kahoot to foster academic development while having fun. So dahil formative siya, they make it fun just to check if they are learning. Ayan. Madami ding platforms na ginagamit to connect with the students. Madaming materials to sustain the learning needs of the students. And then, yan, mga group chat. Actually, karamihan group chat, may nag-use ng Google Classroom para ma-send yung enrichment activities at supplemental activities. Mayroon ding portfolio, assessment, and go beyond. Ang iba go beyond talaga. They do research as well what works for me and for my students. Ayan. So they're contextualizing the performance and summative tasks nila. Ayan. Especially for those na walang access sa TV, radio, or cell phones. Okay. So ito pong Padlet wall natin, hindi pa natin itong balik-balikan. So pag maklik po ninyo itong link nito, nasa comment section, makikita nyo po ito. Ang mga strategies na ito, makikita natin and we can apply that. Pwede tayong magdagdag dito, babalik-balikan nyo. Pwede nyo i-bookmark itong link na ito. This can be a platform where we can share our strategies and our insight as well on classroom assessment, especially sa formative and summative assessment natin during distance education. Ayan, so pwede natin itong balik-balikan. I think the challenge for now para sa ating lahat is paano natin itong mga ginagawa natin ngayon and based sa mga research results at mga presentations natin kanina, paano natin ito pagsasabay-sabay or paano tayo makagawa ng bagong innovation to ensure na yung assessment natin ay relevant and nakikita talaga natin if our learners are learning, especially now during distance education. Ayan. So proceed na tayo sa ating open forum. Maraming salamat po for those who shared. Teds?
Thank you, Emil, sa pagbahagi ng mga strategies na ibinahagi ng ating live audience. We will now proceed to our open forum. So for us to accommodate your questions, please ask only relevant and direct questions to our presenters and indicate to whom your question is directed to. Write your questions at the comment section of this live stream. And kung gusto niyo naman po maging anonymous sa pagtatanong, pwede po tayong magtanong sa ating Padlet wall. Nakapin din po yung ating link dyan sa ating comment section. Okay, wag na po nating patagalin. Let's now proceed to first question. Nandito na po ba yung ating mga presenter kanina, Sir Kaloy, Dr. Therese and Sir Joseph. Ayan, nandito na sila. Sige, ayan, tatanong ko na po ang unang question. This one is for Sir Caloy ng Surigao del Sur. Ayan, may tanong po dito from our audience po sa Facebook. Ang question po, Sir Caloy, ay how can ALS and SPED teachers use the thematic-based authentic assessment? Meron na rin po bang sample sa pag-asa for the ALS and SPED classes? So yun po yung question, Sir Caloy.
Okay, maraming salamat po for that question. For SPED classes, ayun yung isa naming titingnan, how are we going to implement for this school year. Kasi ang na-try lang namin dito sa aming thematic assessment is yun lang po para sa regular class using distance learning. For this year is nakalatag na po ang aming plano para sa SPED nating mga teachers at para po sa ALS. So that is our next step po.
Okay, maraming salamat for that answer. No? So sa mga audience po natin, ginawa po nila sa regular students pa lang, pero ngayon sa susunod po, nakalatag na po for the part na po na ng kanilang plano yung paglatag ng pag-asa intervention sa SPED learners and even ALS learners. Sir Emil, may question pa po ba tayo?
Ayan, yes, meron pa tayong question, Ted. Thank you, Sir Caloy. Meron tayong isang question for, I think this is for Joseph and for Dean Therese. Okay po, ito ay galing sa FB kay Baby C and kay Baby C. Ayan. And itong question na to actually is really interesting as well for us kasi alam natin na very, very thin, manipis yung mga research studies natin sa assessment. So ang katanungan po niya, sa usaping research on assessment, what topics aspiring researchers should look into? May new trends po ba o may topics po ba na hindi pa masyado natututukan? Ayan, kasi tulong-tulong tayo dito to build evidence. So sino po ang gustong unang sumagot? Si Joseph ba or si Dean Therese?
I'll give way muna to Dean Therese. Yeah.
Okay po, Dean Therese, yes.
Okay. Alam mo, konti lang ang research sa formative assessment. Oo. So, kung gusto mong mag-research tungkol doon at gawin natin, merong research na nanggagaling sa labas. Pero kung dito sa Pilipinas, konti lang talaga. So kung gagawin mo yan, isa ka sa mga mauuna o nasa nauunang batch na nagre-research tungkol doon.
Ayan, thank you, Thank you, Dean Therese, for that answer. Formative research, formative assessment. Ayan, manipis ang ating research studies on that dito sa Pilipinas as per Dean Therese. Ayan. Sir Joseph.
Alam mo naalala ko yung conversation natin last week, no, Sir Emil, regarding ito nga sa pagiging manipis nga ng research, and actually constant din yung communications namin ni Dean Therese and her team, no, sa ACT-RC. Especially kahapon din nagkausap kami, we were talking about ano ba yung mga possible researches na pwedeng gawin, di ba, to make sure na makakuha tayo ng maraming evidences about assessment practices. Kasi talaga totoo yun na if you look at yung international literature, marami ka talagang makikita about formative assessment, about grading practices. Pero pagdating dito sa atin, limited pa lang din talaga. And so aside from formative assessment research, we should also look at the ways teachers are grading their students. Ano yung mga motivations, di ba? Para ano yung nag-i-influence sa grading nila. There in the US merong renowned na researcher about sa area na to eh. And they actually looked at parang 100 years worth of research, and doon sa research niya parang sinabi nila na truly ang grades ay hindi siya ganun ka-objective, and it's actually a combination of cognitive and non-cognitive factors. And so it's very interesting for us to find out ano kaya yung mga factors na nag-i-influence sa mga ways na gine-grade natin yung bata. Talaga nga bang based siya doon sa achievement ng bata sa curriculum standards, or it may be something else, diba? Of course, we have to be ready kung ano man yung mga makukuha nating information from it. But still, these are puzzle pieces na kailangan natin to have a comprehensive view really of what influences assessment policy implementation in the country. Kasi ang assessment practice naman, hindi lang yan nandiyan dahil sa DepEd Order number 8 na nirelease noong 2015. Of course, sa mga teachers, nag-a-assess na sila mula nung mag-start ang education system natin, di ba? Ngayon lang talaga nagkakaroon ng focus on formative assessment. And kailangan ma-identify natin ano ba yung mga factors na, yun nga, na nakaka-affect sa assessment practices in the classroom, anong mga levels nag-ooperate yung mga teachers natin, ano yung views nila about summative assessments na kasi ang summative assessments naman pwede rin siyang i-interpret or gamitin formatively. Diba?
Yeah.
So, isa rin yung kailangan tingnan natin na paano ginagamit ng mga teachers yung summative assessment results to improve the learning outcomes of their children. Another good area of research din, yung kakabanggit ko nga kanina, yung mga assessment strategies. Like, pinakita nyo kanya, di ba, sa Padlet na the teachers are using Menti, Kahoot as their assessment strategy. Magandang tingnan nila, no? Gaano ka-effective yung paggamit na ito in enhancing the self-regulation strategies of their students. Pwede rin nating tingnan kung paano na-operationalize yung mga feedback mechanisms sa mga schools. Diba? Anong klaseng mga feedback yung binibigay ng mga teachers sa ating mga students. At ganoon din yung mga binibigay na feedback ng mga students to their peers kung meron mang ganung opportunity sa binibigay para sa kanila. So actually, ang dami. Marami kami pwedeng mabanggit nila Sir Kaloy, nila Dean Terry's, and tingin ko hindi enough yung itong 1 hour man lang para masabi lahat ng yun. But yeah, I think this is a really good time. This is an opportune time for us to craft our respective roadmaps in terms of research and development projects. Yan sila Sir Kaloy, I would like to commend Sir yung initiative nyo dyan sa Surigao kasi magandang start na yan. It's good to start, no, and then improve na lang along the way kesa yung we don't start with anything at all. So at least paisa-isa lang na step. Merong initiative ang Surigao, may initiative si ACT-RC, may initiative let's say sa amin din sa loob, meron din sa ibang schools division offices, but at the end of the day, maganda na maging coherent yung strategy nating lahat towards understanding and improving assessment practices here in the Philippines.
Ayan, salamat Sir Joseph. Ayan, so formative assessment tapos yung motivations ng teachers natin in doing assessment, whether grading, feedbacking, malawak yung ating mga topics na pwedeng saliksikin tungkol sa assessment. Siguro itanong ko na din to kay Sir Kaloy. Sir Kaloy, bilang po kayo po ay gumagawa ng research on assessment, sa tingin niyo po ano pa po ba yung mga areas pa din na pwede nyong or na ini-encourage niyo yung mga teachers to do research on? Sir Kaloy? Ay, sir, yan, nakamute po ata, sir.
Sir Kaloy, you're on mute ata.
Okay po. During the implementation kasi ng thematic assessment, marami pa rin kaming nakikita na points for improvement. We are compelling the teachers to not rely only on thematic assessment, pero mas maganda na gagawa rin sila ng kanilang sariling assessment. Just like for example, we found out during the final evaluation with select teachers na ito palang ito yung actual na nangyayari. Ito palang thematic assessment is only good for proficient and highly proficient students or learners. So nagkakaroon ng medyo kaunting aberya doon sa mga estudyante na belong doon sa below proficient level. So isang tinitingnan namin as point for improvement with thematic assessment is I think we will try also tiered assessment to provide appropriate assessment to those learners who are grouped as not proficient or below proficient. So we will be trying another assessment with the help of our teachers also, so that we can see how feasible the assessment designs that we will provide to them.
Okay po. Thank you, Sir Kaloy. Ayan, so nagbe-build on sina Sir Kaloy sa kanilang current research, different topics na kailangan pang i-explore. Ayan, so madami tayong pwedeng saliksikan. Ayan. So, I'm quite sure na for our viewers right now, for our teachers, researchers, no, for our teacher researchers, I'm quite sure that you're all excited. So gusto nating kumapal ang ating research studies on assessment, formative assessment and summative assessment, and how this affect our pedagogy. No? Kasi sabi nga ni Sir Joseph kanina, no, na it's part of pedagogy. Ayan. So maraming salamat po for that answer. Teds, ano pa ang ating mga katanungan?
This question is for Dr. Tiris Bustos po ng ACT-RC. So ito po ay nanggaling sa kasamahan natin sa planning, no, na si Lawrence po. So ang tanong niya po ay formative communication assessment is very interesting. Paano po namin ma-involve yung mga parents in the assessment of learning during distance learning modalities?
Okay, so una, so parang dalawang topics yan. Yung isa, informal formative assessment conversations, di ba? Tapos ito namang isa, how do we involve parents? Alam niyo po, yung parents, yung iba hindi naman po nila alam ang correct answer. Kaya ko nga sinasabi po na doon sa module, dapat nandun yung key to correction ng mga self-learning module activities. Alam ko, pero di ba pag gumagawa naman po tayo ng module, at gumagawa tayo ng activity, meron naman na tayong key na yon. Isinasama po siya. And that is how parents will find out so what the correct answer is. Hindi lang kaya correct answer. And then we explain there why it is the correct answer. And so this is how you involve them. Oo, you don't need a separate session, a seminar on or for parents on how, well, okay naman din yung seminar for them to how to help their children, but by having the key to correction with explanation in the self-learning modules, you should be able to equip the parent to help the child yung magagawa ng feedback. So hindi yun yung parang pinadali natin kay mami, kokopyahin na lang niya pagsagot niya ng self-learning module. Hindi. Nandun na yung sagot para alam at ma-explain. So, yun yung sinasabi ko na when we shift the control of assessment. So, instead of you, the teacher, knowing all of these things and you being able to give the feedback only when you receive the accomplished self-learning module, that's too late. That takes so much time. Put the assessment key with the module. Huwag nyo nang paghiwalayin. At para rin alam nila na hindi chine-check at hindi gine-grade yung activity na yan. Kasi pag hindi nyo nilagay yung key to correction doon, akalain nila, test yan. Eh di syempre gusto nilang pumasa yung anak nila. Sila na naman ang sasagot. So, those are ways that we can adapt so that we can empower parents to help in the formative aspect of assessing our students.
Okay, ayan, thank you Dr. Tris, no? Ayan, to reiterate kung ano po yung naisabi ni Dr. Tris, importante po yung paglalagay ng answer key sa mga module. In that way, malalaman ng parents at ma-help nila yung kanilang mga anak sa kanilang formative assessment. Sir Emil, may mga questions pa po ba tayo?
Ayan, siguro ito yung ating last question natin sa ating tatlong speakers for this morning. Of course, limited time natin, so hindi natin matatanong, pero yung Padlet po natin open siya and we'll try to answer that. We'll relay that to our speakers para masagot po nila. But the question, I think this is quite interesting, no? And very general, and siguro tips na din for our teachers, no? Ito ay galing sa Facebook from BBC again. How do I move forward as a teacher if the expectation I set for my assessment are not met? So very general. So what tips do you give to our teachers, especially during this time, no? It's distance learning. It's different from the previous setup that we have. Ayan. So ano po yung how do I move forward as a teacher if the expectation I set for my assessment are not met? Sino po ang unang sasagot for our three speakers? Sir Kaloy, Ma'am Therese, or Sir Joseph? Okay, sige po. Dean Therese.
Sige, I'll venture an answer. You don't move forward. Ang ibig ko sabihin, you don't move on to the next learning competency if your student hasn't mastered the competency being targeted. You know, our performance in the PISA and even in the national large-scale assessments did not happen overnight. It's a build-up of competencies that have not been mastered. It's the result of moving quickly, completing the budget of lessons, but not achieving mastery of any of the competencies in the budget of lessons. So let us not repeat history. So how do we move forward? We move forward by staying put. We move forward by spending more time looking at those foundational competencies, making sure that our students know the process skills that are needed to be able to answer those national and international assessments. Ano talaga, I think teachers will have to assert themselves. And supervisors also have to assert themselves for the decisions that they make, not to move on to the next lesson when something has not been mastered yet. So, yun po.
Thank you, Ma'am Theris. We move forward by staying put. I love that statement. Ayan. So, pag hindi na master, let's try our best really to ensure that we are assessing, they're mastering the competencies. Ayan. Maraming salamat po din, Theris. Sir Kaloy or Sir Joseph?
Kakabit ako doon sa sinabi ni Teacher Theris na staying put, no? And for me, while we're staying put, we have to constantly engage in our own reflective sessions, no? And the teaching kasi is not just a simple act that we do inside the classroom. Okay, it's a professional practice. Okay, and so when we say professional practice, it's expected that it should improve over time. Okay, we are not expected to perfect our ways. Okay, kasi nga gaya ng nung famous na sinasabi natin, nobody's perfect, no? But we can only strive for perfection. We can only improve our practices para mag-fit siya, no? Para maging appropriate siya for our learners. Okay? And so if we are not meeting, no, if we're not getting the desired the desired outcomes or yung expected natin na outcomes through our assessments, then maybe signal yun para balikan natin ano yung ginawa natin, paano natin dinesign yung learning experiences for our children, at kung paano din natin dinesign yung mismong assessments natin. Okay? I always argue, and actually ginagamit ko ito laging example na when you craft a 5-item exercise or even a 10-item exercise, tapos lahat ng mga students ay naka-perfect doon sa exercise na yon, you cannot just conclude na they've learned the lesson already and they can proficiently perform this certain skill. They were able to acquire this level of knowledge. I have been an effective teacher automatically. Actually, no. We have to reflect pa din paanong umabot na 100% ay na-achieve ng mga bata yung task na yon. Kasi posibleng 100% ay maka-perfect doon. Kasi baka naman sobrang dali ng mga assessment tasks. And again, if the items or if our tasks are too easy for the children, we are not, for me, it's actually a disservice to them kasi we are not preparing them for the next grade level or for higher topics. Okay? We are parang tayo, we are just focused lang na sige, basta makita natin na successful yung bata. Pero hindi natin natutulungan sila actually by making our tasks too easy for them. Lalo ding hindi helpful kapag if our assessments are too difficult naman for our children. If our students constantly get a 0 or a 1 or a 2, definitely their motivation will be affected, and pwedeng maka-affect yun dun sa the way they value their position in the classroom, na posibleng makita nila na I don't see myself being competent anymore. Remember, di ba, kanina binanggit ko, perceived competence. So kung napakahirap nung assessment task na binigay sa kanya, at lagi siya nag-fail doon dahil nga napakahirap noon, hindi siya, walang necessary scaffolds para ma-attain niya yung level of success na kailangan, at least at the minimum, no? Then definitely, mag-result yan sa kakatamaran niya na yung pag-aaral, hindi na siya magsasubmit, and then later on, doon na papasok yung phenomenon ng dropout. Okay, mag-dropout na yung mga bata kasi nga they don't see themselves being successful anymore kasi they don't see any support from their teacher or anything. So we have to constantly engage ourselves in reflection, and we always have to learn from our mistakes, diba? Again, we cannot expect everything to change overnight. We cannot expect our practices to improve overnight. And so, we cannot expect also our learners to improve themselves overnight, no? Kakatapos lang ng school year nitong June. Tama ba ako? June, di ba? Nung natapos yung school year. Imagine, kung ako grade 6 student, tapos magsa-start na yung school year nitong September. So, June, July, August. Imagine, yung 3 months na expectation na mag-improve agad sila na grade 7 ka na, dapat ito na yung kaya mong gawin. That's unfair to our learners. Diba? Kasi remember, yung current natin na setup na naka-grade level siya, ay syempre, in terms of groupings, naka-base yun sa nila, no? Doon sa ages nila. Pero iba pa rin usapan yung maturation level ng mga bata. Pero ibang bata na posibleng underperforming sila ngayon, pero posibleng mag-mature sila later on. So what's really important for us is to conduct frequent assessments, and we make sure na varied yun. We look at the knowledge that they are acquiring, the skills that they are developing, and even the attitudes that they are na nakukuha nila from their frequent engagements para sa atin, so that even if we think na underperforming sila now, at least we can already equip them with the necessary foundations for them to be successful in the coming school years. Of course, pwede nating sabihin na yung return of investment will be not that immediate, no? Siguro kung baka yung iniisip ni Teacher Baby, no? Baka iniisip niya kasi right away merong return of investment. Of course, dapat naman talaga makita natin na may incremental may increments in terms of development within a within a week, within the month, or within the quarter. But of course, in the long run, yung development, yung holistic development ng mga bata will be much more dependent on the foundations that we were able to set for them. So yun, constant reflection, learning from our mistakes, and continuous use of collection and use of assessment evidence. Yeah. That's my take. Thanks.
Thank you, Sir Joseph. Ayan, so the power of reflection. Yun nga, hindi lang ibig sabihin na perfect lahat, tayo ay kampante na okay na. So it's a matter of reflection. Ayan, sige po, for our final answer from Sir Kaloy. Sir Kaloy, how do we move forward when an expectation is not met?
Para sa akin, ako ay naniniwala na bawat tao ay meron siyang pinapahalagahan sa buhay. So for a teacher to start with a good lesson and good assessment, it is good to know that the teacher must know ano yung mahalaga sa buhay ng isang bata. Ano ang vina-value niya ng mga experience sa kanyang buhay, and probably we could start from there and we could move on towards authentic learning. Kadalasan kasi sa pagbibigay ng bawat guro ng learning and assessment is they're using a one-size-fits-all concept, yung pareho ang ibinibigay sa mga bata. So teachers must have to consider diversity of learners. So pag merong 30 bata sa isang classroom, ang ibig sabihin yan ay merong 30 bata na merong iba't ibang pinapahalagahan sa buhay. When we are going to use what they value, then probably they are interested in learning and assessment because they see that they say that this is something that they must appreciate in their lives, and they are learning from that. To move on from the mistakes in the past, teachers will not just look on or consider the learning activities that they can provide or the assessment tasks that they can provide to their learners, but they must have to look deeply into how will these learners experience the task and the activities, and how will these experiences become form, or how will these experiences form part of their lives, and probably or eventually making them responsible people in the society. Ang pinakapunto naman talaga ng edukasyon ay hindi maging matalino ang ating mga bata, kundi magiging functional sila sa ating mga society. Hindi man sila maging matalino o kasing talino na ini-expect natin na ma-achieve ng isang bata, at least paglaki nila, sila ay mabuting tao. That's all.
Okay po, maraming salamat Sir Keloy once again. Reflective ng ating mga values, ng ating mga gustong ma-achieve ng ating mga learners. Ayan. So maraming salamat po Dean Therese, Sir Joseph, Sir Keloy for that, for those answers, and of course for gracing us this morning. Maraming salamat po. Marami po kaming natutunan from the three of you, and I hope our teachers, researchers, our teachers are inspired, and really yung challenging na nasasabi nila kanina ay ma-turn nila, ma-apply nila ngayon pagdating sa ating simula ng ating klase ngayong September 13 na. Ayan. So maraming salamat po to Dean Therese, Sir Keloy, and Sir Joseph for your time and for sharing your expertise. Maraming salamat po sa inyong tatlo. Okay. Now we proceed to the final. Maraming salamat po sa pag-stay with us. But hindi pa po tayo natatapos. Konti na lang po. But thank you for staying with us. But for the synthesis and closing po, to summarize what we have discussed this morning, may I call on the Chief of the Policy Research and Development Division, Ms. Mariel Bayangos.
Hello, magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Okay pa ba tayo? Ayan, I hope okay pa tayo. Maraming salamat, Emil and Teds, for moderating our episode 3 of Research O'Clock. So I'm sure marami po tayong baon as we end our episode this morning. So hindi lang tayo binusog ng mga speakers natin dun sa technical aspect nung assessing our learners, but also pinabaunan din po nila tayo ng encouragement na, and of course yung pag-acknowledge na bilang mga guro hindi ganun kadali yung trabaho po natin, lalo na po sa pag-antabay sa ating mga mag-aaral. Pero ayun nga, merong hope palagi at merong guidance na maaari tayong na maaaring i-provide sa atin para maging makabuluhan yung paggabay po natin sa atin pong mga mag-aaral. So it's not really, it's not always easy. Nandun po palagi yung acknowledgement po natin mula nung episode 1. Patuloy po nating ine-emphasize yan. At kaya po natin isinasagawa itong Research O'Clock para mas patuloy tayong matuto, magkaroon tayo ng gabay kung paano po natin paghuhusayan ang ating pagtuturo sa atin pong mga mag-aaral. So nagpapasalamat po kami kay Sir Keloy, Sir Joseph, kay Ma'am Therese, for adding knowledge and also sharing their expertise, sharing their experience, and allowing us to really expand po yung mga borders po natin para mas matulungan po natin yung ating pong mga mag-aaral. So thank you so much sa ating pong mga speakers, and syempre nagpapasalamat po kami sa inyo for staying with us. Sa dami po ng napakinggan po natin ngayong umaga, sana mabigyan ko po ng hustisya ito pong synthesis na akin pong napaghandaan. So tatlong bagay po mula sa bilang pag-summarize itong ating session. So una po, we learned from this session that we need to assess our practice ang isang mahalagang katanungan po para po sa session na ito ay how are we measuring learning in the present context? Learning from home is a different experience for our children. It is important to know how this challenging situation is affecting their learning. So mahalaga na unawain yung context nila, yung mga challenges nila, mga nararamdaman nila, naiisip nila, ano yung itsura ng kanilang ng learning environment nila, maaaring makadagdag or makapigil sa kanilang pagkatuto. Ito yung mga mahalagang aspeto na kailangan nating maunawaan. And this includes rethinking our strategies in measuring learning. Yan po yung natutunan po natin sa episode 3. And knowing our learners will help in designing our assessment. Yung second point po na gusto po nating i-highlight din sa session na ito is assess with relevance. Assessments are designed to build our learners at yan po ay paulit-ulit na ibinahagi sa atin ng ating mga presenters ngayong umaga, na yung appropriate assessment strategies will guide teachers in adjusting their teaching strategies to achieve the desired learning outcomes. Also, our assessment results should guide our teachers whether we can move learners to the next. At na-mention po kanina sa isa sa mga presentations na ang assessment is not just about finishing what is in the list. It's about ascertaining that our learners are learning. Assessment is about our learners. So hindi ito paramihan ng natapos. It's about how we aid our learners, how we ensure that they are learning. And for our last point, we have to assess the assessment. So, pagkatapos po nating i-adjust yung mga assessment practices po natin, hindi po nagtatapos doon yung usapan. We have to continue to reflect on the implemented assessment strategies. Systematic inquiry, such as conducting a research, is one way of knowing whether our assessment strategies are working or not. So, kanina po, in-affirm po ng mga speakers po natin na manipis yung ebidensya on assessment. Actually, isa po yan sa mga challenges na kinaharap po namin ng team namin sa pagpili ng mga completed research. Kaya po, iisa lang po yung naibahagi po natin ngayong araw na ito. Sapagkat manipis nga po yung ebidensya around this area and patuloy po namin ini-encourage ang lahat. Kung na-inspire po kayo or may yung mga insights po ninyo dito po sa ating pong episode 3, maaari po rin kayong magsagawa ng mga research din on assessment para mas maging clear po sa atin at mas ma-refine natin yung mga strategiya po natin sa pag-assess ng mga mag-aaral po natin, especially as we are preparing for the upcoming school year. So malaking tulong po iyon, hindi lamang po sa inyo. I'm sure pag naibahagi niyo po yon sa ibang mga kaguruan, malaking tulong po yon sa kanila na matuto dun sa atin pong pagsasaliksik on assessment. Also, we can discuss with peers during our learning action cells. So meron po tayong mga plataforma sa mga paaralan po natin na nagbibigay ng pagkakataon na mapag-usapan hindi lamang yung mga challenges natin sa pagtuturo, maging yung mga strategies na ginagawa natin sa ating pagtuturo para ma-assess yung mga mag-aaral po natin. So maaari po natin gamitin na plataforma ang Learning Action Cell para matuto po sa karanasan ng bawat isa. Also, yung pagbabasa ng mga research findings on assessment ay makakatulong din po yan. Kanina, na-mention po ng mga speakers po natin na may mga literatures na maaari tayong ma-access. Bagamat itong mga literatures na ito ay largely nakasulat sila sa ibang konteksto, magagamit pa rin po natin yon para po tayo ay matuto at ma-improve po natin yung ating pag-assess ng ating mga mag-aaral. And then, yung pag-join ng mga learning communities, ang Research O'Clock ay isang halimbawa po ng learning communities na where you can join and also participate. Nakita niyo po kanina, humingi po kami sa inyo ng inyong mga strategiya kung paano ninyo ginagawa yung assessment for distance learning. So ito po ay isang paraan para matuto tayo together kung paano po natin gagabayan, hindi lang po yung ating mga mag-aaral at paano natin mai-involve yung mga parents sa pag-assess ng ating pong mga ng kanilang mga natututunan. And then, maraming mga paraan para makapag-reflect tayo on our assessments. Pero, ang bottom line po, let's ensure that we assess with a purpose. So, I'd like to close with that, na yung pag-assess po natin ay hindi po yan mere compliance, but really the assessment is should serve our learners at the end of the day. So, yun lamang po. Maraming salamat po sa pakikibahagi po sa amin ngayong episode 3 at sana po ay muli po namin kayong makita sa susunod po na episode. Maraming salamat and good morning. On to you, Emil and Tete.
Maraming salamat, Ms. Mariel, no, sa pagbabahagi and for synthesizing our today's forum. So, ayan, humingi po kami ng paumanhin sa ating mga live audience dahil nag-overtime po tayo ng konti. Pero maraming salamat po sa pagtutok at pag-antabay sa amin. And we value your thoughtful feedback on today's forum. Paki-accomplish po yung ating feedback form. Available po yung link kasama po ng post na ito sa ating DepEd FB page. Pwede nyo rin pong i-scan yung QR code na makikita natin sa ating screen para po ma-access yung ating feedback form. And gusto po namin pasalamatan yung oras ninyo, yung mga comments ninyo, at syempre yung inyong mga tanong. Maraming salamat din po sa ating mga research presenters mula kay Sir Caloy, Sir Joseph, and of course, Dr. Therese. Sa ating pong mga FSL interpreters at yung technical team from PASPD. Maraming salamat po. In case po na na-miss niyo yung ating previous virtual research o'clock at yung episode po today, don't worry po dahil pwede nyo po silang balikan sa ating DepEd FB page. Kinumpile na po namin sila para po pwede nyong mapanood ang aming mga episode. And we hope to see you again, no, sa ating mga susunod na session on September 15, kung saan po we will be discussing about on how to support our learners in the distance learning setup. So salubungin po natin at paghandaan natin ng may positibong pananaw ang pagbukas ng klase ngayong school year 2021 and 2022. Kita-kits po sa susunod nating episode. Ako po si Teds.
Ako po si Emil.
At
Maraming signing off.
po.
Maraming salamat po sa ating lahat. Happy lunch! Thank you po sa lahat na nanood.